Hey guys, tonight we begin with a story about brains, fame, and one man who turned a medical experiment into a traveling roadshow. The 1,950 seconds were obsessed with control of emotion, of behavior, of the neighbors, and along came a doctor who promised all three with a single jab of steel behind the eye. He toured the country in his Lobotomobile, performing hundreds of procedures a week, cheered on by people who thought science was winning. It wasn't. So before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And be sure to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now, get comfortable. Let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You walk into the 1,950 seconds, where everything smells like disinfectant and denial. The air feels clean in that way. Only chemicals can manage sharp, sterile, almost moral. It's a decade polished to a shine. Every lawn is trimmed within an inch of its life. Every housewife powdered to perfection. Every fear tucked behind the curtains. You can practically hear the hum of refrigerators and the soft static of conformity. People smile like they've practiced in the mirror, which they have. The whole country seems to be holding its breath, pretending that after 2 world wars and 1 atomic bomb, everything is finally fine. You can't help noticing how quiet it is beneath the cheer. The radio croons about better living through science, while in kitchens across America, mothers pop tranquilizers like mints and fathers pour bourbon like it's medicine. Everyone's exhausted from pretending to be happy. There's a sense that if you just sit still long enough, the noise inside your head might stop. And if it doesn't, well, there are people working on that. Men in white coats who promise relief, calm, order. The kind of men who look at the brain and see something that can be ironed flat. In this world, emotions are treated like plumbing issues. You're not sad, you're clogged. You're not angry, you're leaking somewhere. And into this mindset strolls a new kind of hero, the psychiatrist with a God complex and an ice pick. People welcome him because he speaks the language of progress. He says words like neural pathways and tranquility. He's not here to listen to your problems. He's here to fix them permanently. And when he talks about inserting a slender piece of metal into the soft machinery of your mind, he does it with the confidence of a man explaining how to change a tire. You notice how the newspapers eat it up. The photos are everywhere. Patients before and after, smiling with that same empty serenity. Reporters call it a miracle cure. They don't show the drool, or the confusion, or the silence that follows. They don't mention the personality that disappears like a shadow at noon. All they see is compliance, and compliance photographs beautifully. You wander down a hospital corridor, shoes squeaking against the waxed floor. The smell of ether hangs thick, sweet, and wrong. A nurse glides past, eyes fixed straight ahead, her expression carefully neutral. She's seen too much to be impressed by miracles. Behind a door, someone hums. The sound is soft, cheerful, and completely out of place. It takes a moment before you realize it's coming from the doctor himself, the man who's about to rearrange someone's mind like furniture. You watch through the narrow window as he raises his instrument a long, thin spike, the kind you've seen in kitchen drawers. The patient's head tilts slightly, a breath caught, halfway between fear and trust. The doctor murmurs something about progress, about helping, about quiet. Then a small, quick tap. It's such a gentle sound for something so violent. The nurse doesn't flinch. The patient doesn't scream. Just stillness. Then a smile that looks pasted on. Outside, cars gleam in the parking lot like chrome prayers. the world keeps spinning. Housewives gather at beauty salons, talking about this new procedure as if it's the latest diet trend. Did you hear? They say it helps with mood swings. Someone laughs, someone nods, and the scissors keep snipping. The idea catches because it's comforting the notion that the messiness of being human can be cleaned up with a tool and a steady hand. You start to realize this isn't about medicine. It's about fear disguised as order. The 1,950 seconds are terrified of feelings, terrified of anything that doesn't fit the picture. The lobotomy becomes a way to erase the noise, to silence the unpredictable. It's the ultimate act of tidying up, and everyone, in their own way, wants to be tidied. Later that night, the glow of television spills across the living room walls. A sitcom audience laughs on cue, the canned kind that sounds like it's coming from 1,000 miles away. You sit there, watching perfect families smile through static, their lives uninterrupted by anything resembling emotion. Somewhere out there, another operation is taking place. Another mind is being quieted. The decade hums on, bright and spotless, the antiseptic scent lingering like a secret no one wants to name. And beneath it all, you can almost hear it, the soft rhythm of hammers and ice picks, tapping out the national anthem of denial. The world is obsessed with calm. You're told emotion is a disease, something contagious that might spread if you aren't careful. People talk about serenity, the way they once talked about God, something to be worshipped, pursued, and, if necessary, medically enforced. Magazines print covers showing women in pearls smiling through their exhaustion, headlines promising peace of mind in 10 easy steps. Housewives trade recipes for casseroles and sedatives. Men come home from work and disappear into armchairs like they've been swallowed by the upholstery. The trick is to stay composed. Anything else looks dangerous. You notice it in the way people speak. Words are soft, rounded, smoothed of any real feeling. Anger, grief, desire. They're all too loud, too messy. Doctors call them episodes, and the cure is waiting in a little orange bottle or behind a locked hospital door. The human spirit is a problem to be solved, not a mystery to be lived with. And if your mind misbehaves, there's always someone in a lab coat ready to quiet it down. Even the advertising hums with reassurance. Radios croon about products that promise relief from nervous tension, as though worry itself were a stain you could scrub out. Everything comes with instructions now: how to smile, how to sit, how to fold your fears neatly into the drawer marked personal. You learn quickly that to feel too much is to fail. Calm is patriotic, control is modern, and a smile, no matter how brittle, is good manners. You sit in a waiting room, leafing through pamphlets printed in comforting blues and creams. They talk about new frontiers in mental hygiene, a phrase that makes the human mind sound like a kitchen sink. Across from you, a woman stares at the floor, her gloved hands twisting in her lap. Her husband whispers that everything will be fine, that the doctor says it's a simple procedure, nothing to worry about. He says it the way a man talks about an oil change. You wonder if he believes it. On the wall, there's a framed poster of a smiling nurse, pointing to a diagram of the brain. Thin black lines mark the places where sadness supposedly lives, where anxiety hides, where hysteria hums like bad wiring. It's presented like a map for explorers. Just follow the route, remove the problem, happiness guaranteed. It all feels so neat, so efficient, so horrifyingly reasonable. When you walk outside, the air feels heavy with unspoken things. Neighbors mow their lawns in perfectly straight lines, radios tuned to the same station. The news speaks in that bright, clipped cadence that never falters, even when describing disaster. You can't shake the sense that everyone's performing a version of themselves, like actors in a play no one remembers rehearsing. The whole country is one big stage set for composure. You think about what it means to live in a time where calm is currency, where the highest praise you can earn is to be well-adjusted. It sounds harmless until you realize that adjustment often means erasure. You watch mothers hush crying children with candy, husbands hush wives with pills, and doctors hush everyone else with scalpels. The world keeps rewarding the quiet ones, the agreeable ones, the ones who don't ask why their hearts ache beneath the smile. Somewhere, a new kind of doctor is making a name for himself. He promises a future without pain, without noise, without disobedience. The idea is intoxicating. Why wrestle with the chaos of being human when you can just turn it off? It spreads like gospel, this promise of peace, and people cling to it because the alternative, actually feeling things, is unbearable. That night, you lie awake listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, the stillness of a world determined to keep itself sedated. There's something unnatural about the silence, something that feels rehearsed. You imagine the thoughts that never get spoken, the screams that never leave the throat. You wonder how long people can pretend not to feel before the pretending becomes real. And as you close your eyes, you understand the danger wasn't that emotion was messy. The danger was that someone decided it needed to be cleaned up. Meet Dr. Walter Freeman, a man who treats the brain like a clogged sink. He moves through hospitals with the energy of a salesman and the confidence of a man who's never once questioned his own brilliance. His suit is slightly wrinkled, his tie always a bit crooked, but he radiates the kind of authority people in the 1,950 seconds trust without thinking. He talks fast, gestures wide, and calls everyone friend. When he describes his work, it sounds like he's pitching a miracle product at a fair, guaranteed to solve all your mental problems or your sanity back. He doesn't wear gloves, doesn't need them. He says they make his hands feel clumsy, and besides, the brain, to him, isn't sacred. It's a machine, a stubborn appliance in need of a quick tune-up. His office looks less like a clinic and more like a workshop. Trays of instruments lined up beside coffee cups, anatomy charts curling at the edges, a half-eaten sandwich resting beside a patient file. He hums as he works, a jaunty little tune that doesn't quite fit the mood. He's proud of that. He likes the contrast. Freeman's eyes light up when he talks about his creation, the transorbital lobotomy. He didn't invent the lobotomy, but he perfected it, or so he insists. The original procedure required drills, operating rooms, anesthesia. Too expensive, too complicated. Freeman wanted something democratic, something that could be done anywhere, to anyone. His version takes only a few minutes, no fancy equipment needed, just an ordinary ice pick, one from his own kitchen in fact, and a small hammer. You can almost see the sparkle in his eyes when he describes it, as if he's sharing a clever life hack rather than a neurological gamble. He calls it the key to peace. Others call it the ice pick miracle. He calls his patients my children. Others call them victims, but not yet. Not when he's smiling and shaking hands with reporters, explaining how simple it all is. He slides the instrument beneath the eyelid, taps it gently past the bone, and sweeps it side to side, cutting away what he calls the emotional clutter. 10 minutes later, the patient wakes up quieter, slower, compliant. Freeman calls that success. He travels the country in a station wagon he's nicknamed the Lobotomobile, carrying his tools and optimism from one hospital to the next. He performs demonstrations in front of medical students and eager townsfolk, cracking jokes as he goes. He's a showman more than a surgeon. He makes the whole thing look easy, effortless, almost casual, like slicing through a grapefruit. And that's the point. He wants to make it accessible, a cure for everyone, from the deeply troubled to the mildly inconvenient. In another era, he might have been a traveling preacher. His gospel is calm, his promise is silence, and his followers are desperate enough to believe him. You can't entirely blame them. The wards are overflowing, the pills are weak, the funding is thin. People want results, not questions. And Dr. Freeman delivers results you can photograph, before and after. Agitated to serene, tears to smiles. Humanity flattened into neat, glossy contrast. When he walks through hospital corridors, nurses fall silent. Some admire him, others avert their eyes. He's unpredictable, sometimes charming, sometimes cruel, always sure of himself. He pats patients' cheeks like they're small children and cracks jokes about how he's cutting out their worries. You don't know whether to laugh or shiver. He talks about the mind the way a mechanic talks about a carburetor efficiently, without reverence. You watch him lift his beloved instrument, the same one he's used hundreds of times, its handle worn smooth from his grip. He doesn't flinch, doesn't hesitate. The patient's eyes are still open when he starts, because anesthesia slows things down and Walter Freeman hates wasting time. A quick tap. Motion like stirring tea. Then it's done. He steps back, wipes the pick with a rag, and nods approvingly. Another one cured, he says. Outside, the reporters scribble furiously. The photographs capture him mid-swing, haloed in light, the embodiment of modern medicine's confidence. He loves the flash of the camera almost as much as the work itself. Every picture makes him look like a pioneer, a savior. And that's exactly how he sees himself. He doesn't notice or refuses to notice the blank stares of his patients afterward, the way their personalities seem to have dissolved. You stand there, watching him beam under the fluorescent light, a man utterly convinced of his own righteousness. He wipes his hands, straightens his tie, and moves on to the next name on the list. To him, it's just another repair job, another brain unclogged, another problem solved. Somewhere down the hall, someone starts humming again. It takes you a moment to realize it's him, still, cheerful, still humming that same offbeat tune as he opens the next chart. The sound follows you long after you leave, tapping lightly at the back of your skull like a memory you can't quite scrape clean. You watch as he drives his lobotomobile from town to town, spreading serenity by the mile. The car is a cream-colored station wagon with chrome so bright it hurts to look at in the sun. In the back, boxes of surgical instruments rattle softly against stacks of patient forms and half-empty coffee cups. The rear window bears a sticker that says, "Psychosurgery on Wheels." A joke, probably, but one that makes you feel uneasy. Freeman loves it. He loves the idea of bringing healing to the masses, one parking lot at a time. The lobotomobile glides down endless American highways, cutting through landscapes of optimism and exhaustion. Small towns rise out of the dust, like mirages, diners, gas stations, and hospitals that smell faintly of overcooked peas. Freeman parks wherever he's invited, sometimes not even invited, because who would turn away the man curing madness? He steps out of the car like a celebrity, hair slicked back, grin sharp enough to slice. He shakes hands with hospital administrators, pats nurses on the shoulder, and launches into his pitch before anyone can object. The pitch is always the same. "We can fix them," he says, as though he's talking about radios that lost signal. No more screaming, no more violence, no more fear. His words are simple, the promise absolute. A family that's been living with chaos for years suddenly sees a future again, one with quiet dinners and polite smiles. The hospital directors see headlines, the newspapers see a miracle. Nobody looks too closely at what's being lost in the exchange. You sit in the back of the demonstration room, the air thick with nervous excitement. Freeman rolls up his sleeves and makes jokes to the crowd, his voice easy and bright. The audience laughs because it's easier than thinking about what's about to happen. A young man sits in the chair at the center of the room, his wrists trembling under the straps. Freeman leans close, murmuring something reassuring, as if reassurance can survive what's next. Then he raises his tool. The audience leans forward. You want to look away, but the motion is hypnotic. The small, precise tap, the sudden stillness. He moves on to the next patient, before the first one has even woken up. He's efficient that way. A few minutes per soul, an afternoon per hospital. He calls it assembly line psychiatry, and he says it like a compliment. The nurses hand him instruments with quiet, mechanical precision. When someone faints, he smiles kindly and says, "Don't worry, friend. The brain doesn't feel pain." You almost believe him, until you notice the tremor in the patient's hand, the way the eyes flutter open too soon. When the day ends, Freeman packs his instruments back into the lobotomobile with the care of a man polishing trophies. He wipes each one clean, humming that same off-key tune, and tosses the bloody towels into a tin bucket. The road is waiting, always waiting, stretching endlessly toward the next desperate town. He drives through twilight, headlights cutting through fields, and half-lit billboards advertising soap, cigarettes, happiness. Somewhere between the static of the radio and the rhythm of the tires, you start to realize he believes in this. Not for money, not for fame, though he enjoys both, but because he truly thinks he's saving people. That conviction might be the scariest part. At night, the lobotomobile becomes a moving confessional. Freeman dictates notes into a recorder, his voice calm, clinical. Case 342 post-op response satisfactory. Husband reports increased docility. He doesn't mention the blank stare, the way the patient forgot her children's names. Details like that only complicate progress. He talks about the miracle of simplification, a phrase he likes to repeat. To him, peace is a subtraction problem. You remove enough of a person, and eventually, you reach calm. You pass small towns glowing faintly in the distance, their main streets empty except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Inside those houses are people who have heard his name, whispered it like a spell. They're waiting for him, their hope heavy and shining. You think about how easily faith finds a new form when people are desperate enough, how a doctor in a car can become a prophet if he promises quiet in a noisy world. By dawn, he's parked outside another hospital. The lobotomobile door creaks open, and Freeman steps out with the energy of a man just getting started. The sun rises behind him, painting the world gold and clean, as if it were new again. The nurses are already waiting, the charts lined up like invitations. He whistles as he walks toward them, coat fluttering in the breeze, ready to carve serenity into yet another set of lives. You watch the car gleam in the morning light and realize it's not just a vehicle, it's an altar on wheels, rolling across America, leaving quietness wherever it stops. And behind that calm, something hollow begins to echo. Patients line up, not because they understand, but because someone said it might help. The waiting room hums with the soft shuffle of shoes and the quiet sighs of people who've run out of options. Mothers, veterans, teenagers, husbands, they sit shoulder to shoulder beneath a flickering fluorescent light, each clutching a form that promises calm. No one asks for details. They've learned not to. The word help is enough. It's a magic word, heavy with hope and the kind of trust that comes from exhaustion. A nurse walks by, her shoes squeaking, her smile practiced. She carries a clipboard like a shield. When she calls a name, a head lifts, and someone stands with the obedient slowness of a person being summoned to judgment. The others don't look up. They've seen what happens when curiosity gets you labeled uncooperative. The nurse leads the patient down the hall, and for a moment, the sound of their footsteps is the only real thing in the world. You can smell antiseptic and coffee. Someone coughs. A man in a suit flips through a magazine without seeing a single word. Next to him, a woman whispers to her daughter that everything will be fine, that the doctor knows what he's doing. Her voice trembles in the middle of the sentence, but she keeps smiling. That's what you do here, you smile, even when you don't know why. The door opens. A patient comes out, eyes wide and unfocused, a faint trickle of blood at the corner of one nostril. The nurse guides them to a chair like a mother leading a sleepy child. All done, she says, her tone light, almost cheerful. The patient blinks slowly, trying to remember something, what day it is. Maybe their own name, but the thought slips away before it lands. The nurse pats their shoulder, hands them a tissue, and moves on. The room doesn't react. It's easier not to. In the corner, you hear a man mutter that he's been nervous for years, that he can't sleep, that this new procedure is supposed to fix it. His wife nods quickly, eyes darting around the room, as if saying it out loud might get them sent home. He tries to laugh, but it catches in his throat. The laughter turns into a cough, and the nurse looks over, tight-lipped. He stops immediately. You glance at the posters on the wall. They show smiling faces with words like renewal and peace of mind. The letters are bold and reassuring, like advertisements for toothpaste. There's a before and after photo of a woman who once looked terrified and now just looks empty. Beneath it, a caption, "Thousands helped. Why not you?" When the doctor finally appears, the room straightens up as if gravity has shifted. Freeman walks in carrying his metal case, his voice bright, full of the warmth people mistake for kindness. "Who's ready to feel better?" he asks. The question lands like sunlight on frost, too bright, too sudden. A few people chuckle nervously, others just nod. You notice how he scans the room, eyes gliding over the faces like a man choosing fruit at a market. He doesn't see individuals, just potential transformations. The nurse hands him a file. He claps his hands together and says, "Excellent. Let's make another success story today." The door closes behind him, and the sound it makes feels final. Outside, a delivery truck passes, its radio faintly playing a cheerful tune about love and summer. Inside, another name is called. Someone stands. Someone else looks at the floor. The line moves forward, patient after patient, calm and trusting, as if healing is just a matter of time and obedience. The hum of the fluorescent light fills the silence again, steady and unfeeling. And still, no one asks what help really means. Housewives, soldiers, children, all waiting for their turn at peace. The line winds through the corridor like a quiet parade of exhaustion. You can tell who's been here the longest by how still they've become, how their shoulders fold in on themselves like pages that have been reread too many times. Some whisper prayers, others hum to fill the silence. The sound of shoes sliding on tile becomes its own kind of rhythm, steady, resigned, almost ritualistic. Everyone here has been promised the same thing: relief, not joy, not purpose, just the gentle quiet that comes after the noise has been surgically removed. The housewives arrive first, their lipstick perfect, their hands shaking only when no one's watching. They've been told their nerves are the problem. Too much feeling, too much thinking, too much of everything. Their husbands signed the forms, patted their arms, and said things like, "You'll thank me later." The women don't argue. They've learned that silence keeps the peace, even before the operation promises to make it permanent. One of them adjusts her pearls, another smooths her skirt, and you can see the hope flickering behind their fear. Maybe, they think, this is what good wives are supposed to do, sacrifice a little of themselves for the sake of harmony. The soldiers sit apart, their faces still mapped with old wars. They were heroes once. Now they shake too much or shout in their sleep, and the neighbors don't like it. Shell shock, the papers call it, but Freeman prefers simpler terms: fixable. He tells them he can smooth out the rough edges, take away the flashbacks, make the world quiet again. The soldiers don't say much. They've learned that talking doesn't help, that memories have teeth. So they wait, eyes half-lidded, watching the nurses move like ghosts through the hallway. One taps his boot against the floor in time with a rhythm only he hears. And then there are the children. You don't expect to see them here at first, too small, too alive, but there they are, their legs swinging from the waiting chairs. Parents whisper to them that it won't hurt, that it's just to help them behave better, listen better, be better. A little girl clutches a doll with one arm, her other hand bandaged from where she bit herself. Her mother strokes her hair, eyes distant, repeating the doctor's words like a prayer. She'll be calm after this. She'll be calm. Freeman believes in early intervention. He says it's easier to fix a mind before it fully grows into itself. You notice the sameness in the waiting faces, the dull glaze of desperate trust. They all want to believe that peace can be delivered like medicine, that sanity is something you can buy by appointment. In a way, it's easier than facing the alternative that the human mind isn't meant to be neat. So they wait. For hours, for days, for their name to be called. The line moves slowly, but no one complains. The stillness is contagious. Even the air feels sedated. Behind the closed doors, the rhythm continues. Tap, slide, wipe, repeat. Freeman moves quickly, efficiently, like a man trimming hedges. The nurses carry out his instructions with the calm precision of habit. When a patient stumbles out, eyes glassy and smile uncertain, the next one steps forward automatically. No one wants to acknowledge the vacancy behind the calm. The success stories are always quiet, and quiet is what everyone's after. A journalist once described Freeman's work as cutting out the sadness. It sounds poetic until you see it in practice, until you watch a woman forget the names of her children and call that healing. Still, the papers keep printing words like miracle and progress. The world loves a solution that doesn't ask questions. As night falls, the hallway empties. A nurse gathers up discarded tissues and smudged lipstick prints on paper cups. Somewhere, a child's doll lies face down on the floor, its plastic smile cracked. In the next room, Freeman is still working, still chasing the promise of perfect calm. His voice carries faintly through the door, bright and casual, as if he's chatting about the weather. "She'll feel better now," he says, wiping his hands. And in the waiting room, where the lights buzz low and the air smells of antiseptic and fear, the last few names are called. Housewives, soldiers, children, all stepping forward, one by one, toward the peace they were promised, and the silence they never asked for. You see the glint of the instrument, a repurposed ice pick, slightly bent from use. It rests on a small metal tray beside a coffee cup, its handle dulled by fingerprints, its tip catching the light in a way that feels almost proud of itself. It shouldn't belong here, in this sterile room that smells faintly of bleach and burnt dust, yet somehow it fits perfectly. The ice pick isn't a tool anymore, it's an idea, a shortcut, a symbol of how far people will go to make pain look manageable. Freeman picks it up like an old friend. He holds it with a kind of reverence, rolling it between his fingers as if testing its loyalty. You can tell he loves this object, not because of what it does, but because of how it makes him feel ingenious, unstoppable, necessary. To him, it's the key to human tranquility. To everyone else, it's a household utensil that's been promoted far beyond its pay grade. He wipes the tip with a square of gauze, more for show than hygiene, and hums something tuneless under his breath. The patient on the table watches him the way you might watch a magician preparing a trick, nervous, hopeful, unsure whether to clap or cry. Their hair is already pinned back, their eyes darting between the ice pick and the ceiling. There's a whisper of movement from the nurses as they secure the straps, soft clicks and quiet murmurs meant to disguise what's really happening. The doctor calls for the Antel hammer, a short, rounded thing that looks borrowed from a toolbox. Nothing in the room feels surgical, yet everything is about to become irreversible. Freeman leans in close, speaking in that calm, cheerful tone he's famous for. "You'll feel better soon," he says, as if it's a guarantee. He doesn't look at the patient's face when he says it. His eyes are fixed on the point just above the eyelid, the delicate border between thought and silence. Then he places the pick, right there, in that soft hollow that wasn't meant for metal. The hammer rises, pauses, falls. A dull tap, a tiny crunch, and the sound of air being pulled out of the room. He moves with practiced ease, sliding the pick side to side like he's smoothing frosting. There's no rush, no hesitation. The nurses avert their eyes, one of them adjusting the patient's head slightly, the other checking the clock, even though time has stopped meaning anything. When Freeman steps back, it's almost theatrical. He wipes the tool again, nods to himself, and smiles like he's just signed a masterpiece. The patient's breathing steadies, though their eyes no longer focus on anything. "There now," Freeman says. "That's better." He says it every time, and every time it sounds like he believes it. The ice pick goes back on the tray beside the cup, faintly stained, faintly bent. He doesn't notice the bend anymore. It's just part of the tool now, a little imperfection earned through experience. He likes that. It makes it feel personal, like a painter's favorite brush or a carpenter's worn chisel. It's his signature. You can smell iron in the air, faint but unmistakable. The nurses clean up quickly, efficient and wordless, like stagehands between scenes. Outside, in the hallway, another patient waits. Freeman calls for them before the bed is even rolled away. The ice pick gleams again under the fluorescent lights, catching the reflection of his steady hand. You wonder how something so ordinary could become something so monstrous, how easily familiarity dulls horror. He doesn't pause between procedures anymore. He doesn't need to. Each tap, each cut, is another mark in his growing legend, another victory over the chaos of the human mind. And with every success, the instrument shines a little brighter, as if feeding on the faith people place in it. The pick has seen things it was never meant to see, done things it was never meant to do, yet here it stays, loyal, dependable, shining quietly in its tray. As the door closes behind him, the sound of the metal clinking against the table lingers in the air, soft, rhythmic, final. It's the kind of sound that follows you long after you leave, a sound that makes you realize peace has a price, and sometimes that price is the sound of steel meeting bone. Freeman hums while he works. The room smells faintly of bleach and hope, that strange hospital blend of sterility and faith, the kind of scent that insists something good must be happening, because surely nothing that clean could hide anything terrible. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead, casting everything in a hard white glow that makes skin look waxy, unreal. You can hear the faint metallic jingle of his tools on the tray beside him, the quiet rhythm of routine dressed as progress. He moves with the unhurried precision of a man polishing silverware, humming a tune you half recognize a song from the radio, something cheerful about summer or love. The sound doesn't fit the room, but that's the point. He likes the contrast. The patients come in shaking, crying, clinging to fragments of themselves, and Freeman greets them like guests at a dinner party. His words are soft, almost affectionate, as he explains what he's about to do, even though he doesn't expect them to understand. He believes that reassurance, not accuracy, is what medicine needs most. The nurses stand like sentinels, efficient and polite. Their hands move, automatically, handing him gauze, adjusting restraints, taking notes that will later be filed under improvement. One of them, the younger one, keeps her eyes on the floor when he begins. She doesn't like to watch, though she'll never admit it. The older nurse, the one with lines etched deep around her mouth, doesn't look away. She's seen worse, she tells herself, though she can't quite remember when. Freeman places the pick against the patient's temple, pauses just long enough to murmur, "You'll feel better soon," and then taps it through with a sound like cracking thin ice. He hums louder as he works, the rhythm of the song syncing with the delicate motion of his hand. He talks as he moves, lecturing to no one in particular about the wonders of psychosurgery, about his dream of a future free from madness. He makes it sound beautiful. "Imagine," he says, "a world without suffering, a world without fear." His tone is calm, almost wistful, like he's describing a painting rather than carving into someone's mind. The patient's body stiffens once, then relaxes, eyes unfocused and glossy. Freeman steps back, satisfied, wiping his hands on a towel that used to be white. "There," he says quietly, to no one in particular. "Peace." The nurses clean the table quickly, silent as snowfall. One straightens the patient's blanket, another adjusts the pillow, as though small gestures of kindness can make up for what's been taken. Freeman scribbles something in his notes, humming again, the tune now slower, softer. You realize the melody hasn't changed in hours, just his tempo. Maybe it helps him keep time. Maybe it helps him forget. Outside the operating room, the hallway hums with the muffled sounds of the hospital. The roll of wheels, the faint echo of footsteps, a cough that never quite stops. Another patient waits just beyond the door, clutching their coat, unaware that the world they're about to enter will not be the same when they leave. Freeman likes to keep things moving. Too much time between procedures makes people nervous. He says that efficiency is the key to compassion. He takes a sip of coffee, grimaces it's gone cold, and sets the cup beside the tray. The ice pick catches the light again, still faintly wet, still shining. He adjusts his tie, wipes his hands, and glances toward the door. The hum in his throat deepens into something like a sigh, but it's not exhaustion, it's satisfaction. To him, this is progress. The song in his head keeps playing, looping endlessly, cheerful and cruel in equal measure. The nurses bring in the next patient. He greets them with the same practiced warmth, the same steady smile. The cycle repeats. The room smells stronger now, bleach, sweat, metal, and something else beneath it all. Something human, trying not to be noticed. Freeman hums louder, covering the silence. The world outside keeps spinning, believing that peace is being manufactured in here. And maybe, in a way, it is. But standing in that white room, you can't help but think that peace shouldn't sound like this. It shouldn't hum. It shouldn't smell like bleach. It shouldn't feel like surrender. The first tap of the hammer, a tiny sound that changes everything. It's barely more than a click, really, the kind of noise that wouldn't even turn a head in another room. But here, under the hum of the fluorescent lights, it's a thunderclap. Freeman doesn't flinch when he hears it. He's made that sound thousands of times. To him, it's routine, a small step toward what he calls peace. To everyone else, it's the moment a person becomes something else. The patient's head jerks once, instinctively, as the metal pierces the fragile bone behind the eye. Then, stillness. Freeman's hand steadies the handle, his expression calm, almost serene, like a painter holding a brush at the start of a masterpiece. The nurses don't move, though. One of them swallows hard. She's learned that silence is part of the process. The patient's breathing hitches, soft and shallow, but no one reacts. You realize quickly that in this room, reactions are unprofessional. Freeman hums again, the same mindless tune, as if to fill the air before thought can. The ice pick trembles slightly in his grip, and he adjusts, tapping once more, lighter this time, a craftsman refining his work. He murmurs something about precision, about the beauty of efficiency, his words blurring with the rhythmic clink of metal and bone. It doesn't sound like surgery, it sounds like carpentry, the careful work of someone building something he can't see but deeply believes in. The patient exhales, long and low, like air leaving a balloon. Their eyes flutter, not quite closed, not quite open. Freeman withdraws the instrument, wipes it clean on a folded towel, and turns to admire his work. "That's it," he says softly. "All done." He says it every resented time, like a closing prayer. He doesn't look at the person on the table anymore. He looks past them, already thinking about the next one, the next sound, the next small miracle of silence. The nurse unstraps the patient's wrists, and the limp hands fall to their sides. Freeman gestures for her to lift the chin, to check the pupils. "Calm," he says with quiet satisfaction, as if calm were the same thing as alive. He writes a note on his clipboard, quick and neat. Procedure successful. He likes that word successful. It looks good on paper, clean and unambiguous. You can feel it, though the room isn't clean. The air is thick, heavy with something invisible and wrong. The bleach and coffee can't cover it. It's the smell of something human being filed away, the faint trace of consciousness burning off. Freeman doesn't notice. He's already calling for the next patient, his tone bright, encouraging. "We're making history today," he says. And maybe he believes it. Maybe he has to. Outside, the hallway hums with a restless quiet. The families in the waiting room don't know what that small sound means. They sit clutching purses, hats, handkerchiefs, telling each other that everything will be fine. "The doctor's brilliant," someone whispers. "He's changed so many lives." They don't know that change can mean subtraction. They don't know that the hammer doesn't make a wound, it makes an absence. Back inside, Freeman's hands move automatically now. He doesn't hesitate, doesn't waver. Tap, slide, wipe. Tap, slide, wipe. The rhythm is steady, the tune in his head matching the pattern. The nurses keep up without speaking. It's a dance of precision, the choreography of denial. Every sound is small, but each one leaves something bigger behind. When it's over, he straightens his coat, sets the hammer down gently beside the tray, and steps back to admire the tools. The pick, the towel, the clipboard, all shining with purpose. He tells a joke to the nurse, something light about steady hands, and she forces a smile. The patient breathes quietly, shallow but steady. Freeman nods, pleased. "A new beginning," he says, and you can't help but notice how strange it is that the moment peace arrives, it sounds like the faintest knock in the world. So small, so harmless, you almost wouldn't hear it at all. Except you do. Once you've heard it, you never stop. The first tap of the hammer echoes long after the room has emptied, a quiet reminder that sometimes progress doesn't roar. Sometimes it just clicks. The nurses avert their eyes, pretending this is science, not sorcery. They move with quiet precision, trained to appear calm even when their stomachs twist. One checks the patient's pulse, another adjusts the lamp, their motions crisp, practiced, deliberately mundane. The trick is to make everything look procedural. If it looks like procedure, then it must be progress. They tell themselves this every day, the same way you might whisper a prayer you've stopped believing in. The younger nurse, her name tag says, Evelyn tries not to look at the tray. She focuses on the clipboard instead, on the neat columns of patient names that feel like a spell of their own. Each name is a story condensed into a single line. Depression, hysteria, anxiety, insomnia, words tidy enough to disguise their weight. She bites the inside of her cheek as Freeman hums, the same cheerful tune as always. It's almost comical, this mismatch between the song and the work, like whistling while patching a sinking ship. Freeman doesn't notice their discomfort, or maybe he does, and simply doesn't care. His eyes gleam with the satisfaction of a man too deep in his own conviction to see the edges of it. "Remarkable, isn't it?" he says, gesturing toward the patient whose eyelids flutter faintly. The nurses nod because that's what they're supposed to do. To disagree would mean seeing too much, and seeing too much would make them complicit. It's easier to nod, easier to believe that medicine and mercy are always the same thing. The older nurse, Margaret, has seen more than she'll ever say. She stands at the edge of the room, her hands folded neatly in front of her apron. When Freeman speaks, she listens without listening. Her mind drifts to the days when hospitals smelled like lavender and iodine, when doctors still paused before breaking skin. She remembers the first time she saw this new procedure, the noise it made, the way the patient went still, and how the silence afterward felt heavier than before. She told herself it was progress then too. You have to, or the walls start closing in. Evelyn drops a gauze pad, and the sound of it hitting the floor is sharper than it should be. Freeman glances over, smiling that patient, fatherly smile. "No harm done," he says, and the tone makes her blush. He likes to think he's charming, approachable. The nurses are his audience as much as his assistants. He talks about the human brain the way other men talk about cars, how easily it breaks, how satisfying it is to fix. The patient exhales softly, a sigh that could mean relief or emptiness. Freeman calls it calm. He always does. He gestures for the chart, scribbles his notes, and speaks as if lecturing a classroom. "You see, the trouble with emotion," he says, "is that it's inefficient. Too much noise, too much waste." Evelyn nods again, though her throat feels tight. Margaret says nothing. Her eyes flicker to the patient's face, the slack mouth, the faint streak of blood beneath one eye. She forces herself to look away. When Freeman finishes, he cleans his instrument like a ritual, the movements smooth, reverent. He hums louder now, the melody dancing just out of key. The nurses begin resetting the room, wiping surfaces, straightening sheets, erasing evidence. They move as if afraid to break the illusion. Science is order. Order means control. And control, at least here, must never look uncertain. Evelyn catches her reflection in the metal tray, just for a moment. Her face looks pale, distorted by the curve of the steel. She wonders what her mother would think if she could see her now, helping a man perform miracles that look so much like surrender. Margaret touches her shoulder lightly. "Don't think," she whispers. "It's not a warning, it's advice." Outside, the hallway buzzes faintly with life. Patients shuffle past, the smell of antiseptic following them like ghosts. The nurses step aside to let them through, their faces composed, unreadable. Freeman walks beside them, chatting about the next round of procedures, the next great leap forward. He calls it a revolution. They call it a schedule. By the time the lights are switched off, the room is spotless again. The air still hums faintly with the residue of what just happened, but no one mentions it. The nurses wash their hands until the skin burns, then clock out one by one, their shoes echoing down the hall. Freeman stays behind for a moment, gazing at his tools. The ice pick catches the light, gleaming like an answer. In the end, everyone convinces themselves it's just medicine. Science, not sorcery. But the smell of bleach lingers. And beneath it, something else. Something faintly metallic, faintly human that refuses to wash away. Newspapers celebrate the miracle cure. Pain erased in 10 minutes. The headlines scream it in thick black ink, stretching across front pages like a promise. Photos show smiling patients with tidy hair and glassy eyes, sitting beside Dr. Freeman as though they've been born again. The flashbulbs love him. He tilts his head toward the camera, his grin wide, confident, practiced. His sleeves are rolled up just enough to suggest he's a man of both intellect and action, someone who saves the world with his hands. The articles gush about innovation, about courage, about the future. "Revolutionary doctor frees thousands from their suffering," one declares. The reporters call him the surgeon of the soul. They don't mention the pick or the hammer or the hollow quiet that follows. Instead, they print words like miracle, renewal, and hope. It's a national love affair, with the idea that suffering can be erased with a simple stroke of genius and maybe a little bit of steel. In living rooms across America, people read these stories over coffee and toast. Housewives fold the paper neatly and murmur to their husbands about the wonders of modern medicine. "Imagine," they say, "if sadness really could be cured." The husbands nod, half listening, more interested in the sports page. But the seed is planted. The idea grows fast in a decade desperate for comfort. Doctors are gods, hospitals are temples, and science is the only salvation left after 2 wars and 1 bomb. Freeman feeds it perfectly. He gives interviews, with the easy charm of a man who knows he's right. "We're not just treating patients," he tells one reporter. "We're giving them their lives back." He waves his hands for emphasis, smiles at the camera, and you can see the audience at home wanting to believe him. The world is tired of anxiety, tired of madness, tired of emotions that can't be measured or fixed. Freeman offers a shortcut, and people love shortcuts. The papers print testimonials too, quotes from grateful families who don't know how else to explain what's happened. "She's calm now," one husband says, beaming in a photo. "She used to worry so much." Another mother says her child finally sits still. No tantrums, no noise. They say it with relief, not realizing that the silence isn't peace, it's absence. But absence photographs beautifully. In the newsroom, editors sip whiskey and argue about which adjectives sell better, miracle or breakthrough. They pick both. The headlines get bigger, bolder, almost evangelical. People who once whispered about mental illness now clip the articles and mail them to relatives. They write letters to hospitals asking for information, for appointments, for hope. And the hospitals oblige, because Freeman's cure brings attention, funding, prestige. Everyone wants to be part of progress. You can almost feel the hum of excitement ripple through the country. Television hosts mention the lobotomy between commercials for soap and cigarettes. A modern marvel, they call it. And then the audience laughs at a joke and the band plays them to commercial break. The whole thing feels so tidy, so optimistic, like history finally remembered to smile. In one photograph, Freeman stands beside a patient who stares blankly into the distance. The caption calls her transformed. You look closer, though, and the expression isn't joy, it's vacancy, the kind of quiet that feels bottomless. But the photo editor crops it just above her eyes. You don't need to see everything to sell a story. Freeman collects the clippings, keeps them in a leather portfolio he shows to colleagues. He loves how the words look in print. Genius, pioneer, healer. He reads them aloud to himself sometimes, as if they're proof of something holy. The man who slices through the brain has become a celebrity. He's invited to conferences, dinner parties, even radio shows. He talks about liberation, about the miracle of modern psychiatry, about how one small tap can change a life. He never mentions the ones who didn't wake up or the ones who did but never spoke again. You can't blame the public entirely. They're hungry for hope, and he feeds it to them with a steady hand and a shining smile. The country wants to believe in the kind of cure that fits in a headline, the kind that doesn't ask uncomfortable questions about the human soul. The newspapers keep printing, and the people keep reading, and somewhere in the background, the sound of tapping steel continues, soft but steady. Because miracles, it turns out, photograph well. They just don't always survive the print. You hear the applause from families desperate for normalcy. It starts small, hesitant, like they're clapping for something they don't entirely understand but want to believe in. Then it builds louder, more certain, the kind of applause that comes from exhaustion more than joy. It echoes down hospital hallways, bounces off linoleum floors, fills the spaces where questions should be. They're not applauding science so much as salvation. The man in the white coat has promised them peace, and for a world bruised by chaos, peace sounds like a miracle worth clapping for. You stand among them and watch as the doctor shakes hands, smiling that movie star smile. The air smells of coffee and rubbing alcohol, of relief and denial. Reporters scribble notes while photographers capture families posing beside their cured loved ones. The flashbulbs pop like tiny bursts of validation. Everyone wants to believe they've just witnessed the end of suffering. The words, "Thank you, doctor," hang in the air like a hymn. A mother clutches her daughter's hand, tears glinting in her eyes. "She's calm now," she says softly, voice trembling with awe. The girl beside her stares straight ahead, her face smooth and empty, eyes blinking like an old clock's pendulum. The mother doesn't notice. She's too busy thanking the man who gave her back her version of normal. Around them, other families repeat the same ritual embraces. Tears, nervous laughter, all of it held together by the fragile illusion that stillness equals healing. Freeman thrives on it. He loves the stage, the reverence. He tells jokes to the crowd, makes light of the blood and bone behind the miracle. 10 minutes to happiness, he quips, and they laugh because they want to. It's easier to laugh than to ask what happened in those 10 minutes. He pats a patient's shoulder, poses for another photograph, and looks every bit the hero. To them, he's not a man holding an ice pick, he's a prophet holding proof that the human mind can be tamed. The applause swells again as another patient shuffles out of the operating room. A wife throws her arms around her husband's neck, crying with relief. He doesn't hug her back, but she takes his stillness as serenity. Behind her, a reporter murmurs to a colleague, "You can't print tragedy beside a man like that. People need to believe in something." And he's right. The world is too tired for nuance. You notice one father lingering near the back, his son sitting motionless beside him. The man's hands tremble as he smooths the boy's hair. "It worked," he whispers, maybe to himself, maybe to the walls. His voice cracks on the last word. For a second, you think he's going to cry, but then he straightens up, claps twice, and joins the others. The sound of his palms against each other is sharp, final, a declaration that doubt has no place here. The nurses stand at the edge of the crowd, clapping too, though their faces give them away. Their smiles are small, strained, the kind that cost effort. They've seen the aftermath, the blank stares, the confusion, the slow unraveling of what used to be a person. But in this moment, they join in. Applause is safer than silence. Silence might sound like guilt. Freeman bows slightly, as though he's accepting an award, and says something about the boundless future of medicine. The words are grand, and the audience eats them up. He talks about freeing minds, about conquering madness. He doesn't mention that peace, in his definition, means erasure. The flash of a camera catches him mid-sentence, and you realize this is how history is made through applause loud enough to drown out doubt. When the crowd disperses, the sound fades into the sterile hum of the hospital. The patients sit quietly, blinking, their families chatting around them like tourists after a parade. Someone laughs too loudly. Someone else asks when they can go home. The nurses move through them with soft voices, guiding them toward the exit, where the cool evening air feels too sharp, too real. Freeman stays behind, collecting his notes, humming under his breath. The clapping still echoes faintly in his ears. To him, it's not applause, it's confirmation. Proof that the world understands him, that he's not cutting people open but cutting them free. Outside, the street lamps flicker on, casting long shadows across the hospital steps. A woman stands there, holding her newly healed husband's hand. He stares at the sky, expression blank, while she whispers, "You're better now, aren't you?" She squeezes his fingers, waiting for an answer that doesn't come, and somewhere behind them, in the fading sound of applause, you can hear what no one dares to say aloud, that sometimes the quiet everyone's been praying for is the sound of something lost forever. Hospitals turn into factories of silence. The talkative are made quiet. The anxious are made still. The unpredictable are made manageable. You can hear it in the way footsteps echo down the linoleum halls, steady, rhythmic, obedient. The world has discovered efficiency in the human mind. Rooms once filled with the sounds of crying, laughter, arguing are now hushed. The doctors call it progress. The newspapers call it peace. But walking through these corridors feels like wandering through a museum of erased people. Each ward hums with a strange, tranquil order. Beds are lined up perfectly, white sheets pulled tight enough to bounce a coin. The patients sit upright, staring at the walls, blinking on some invisible timer. Nurses move among them with quiet grace, their shoes whispering across the floor. Everything looks clean, controlled, safe. Yet the silence feels heavy, like a thick fog that's settled over everything once human. You pause outside one of the rooms. A woman sits by the window, hands folded neatly in her lap. A few weeks ago, she was known for her voice loud, opinionated, and quick to laugh. Now, her lips barely part when she breathes. The nurse calls her improved. The husband says she's easier now. She turns her head toward the sound of your footsteps, eyes slow to follow. And for a heartbeat, you can see something flicker behind them. A memory, maybe. Then it's gone. In another ward, a row of men sit at a long table, playing cards with unshuffled decks. They lift and drop the same cards over and over, faces blank, movements automatic. A nurse walks by and says, "They used to fight. Now look quiet as monks." She says it with pride, but there's a tremor in her voice that betrays her. You can't tell if she's proud of them or just trying to convince herself this was worth it. Freeman moves through the halls like a conductor, nodding at nurses, adjusting his tie, offering small pats on the shoulder. He looks at his patients with the affection of a gardener inspecting trimmed hedges. "We've restored balance," he tells a visiting journalist. "The storm has passed. Look how calm they are." The journalist scribbles notes, smiling politely, careful not to question the piece he's being shown. Cameras click. The flash catches Freeman mid-gesture, his hand raised like a man blessing his creation. But when the flash fades, the truth lingers in the corners. The twitch of a hand, the faint hum of someone whispering nonsense under their breath, the way the air feels too still. You can't help noticing that the silence isn't peace. It's absence. Like someone turned down the volume on life itself. Families visit on Sundays, bringing flowers and magazines, trying to act normal. They talk about the weather, about church, about the neighbors. Their loved ones nod and smile faintly, their responses looping like a broken record. "Yes, that's nice. I'm fine." The families cry on the way out, though they don't always know why. They tell themselves this is better, that the doctors have done something good, that maybe healing was supposed to look like forgetting. Outside, the world keeps applauding. Hospitals advertise the procedure in glossy pamphlets, a new dawn in psychiatry. The numbers grow, 10,000, 20, 50, entire wards converted for lobotomy patients. There's a strange comfort in the uniformity, a kind of moral anesthesia spreading across the country. People start to measure sanity, not by how alive someone feels, but by how quiet they've become. And you realize that somewhere along the line, noise became the enemy. Anger, grief, laughter, longing, all rebranded as symptoms to be scrubbed out. The goal was never happiness. It was silence. Order. A world where no one questions, no one shouts, no one aches. In the dim hospital light, Freeman's reflection gleams faintly in the glass of a medicine cabinet. He smiles at it, adjusts his coat, and hums a little tune. The same one he always hums when the work is done. The nurses stand still, waiting for instructions that never come. The air hums too, faintly electric, faintly wrong. It's the hum of machines without souls, of minds wiped clean, of voices that will never rise again. The hospitals hum like factories now, each one producing the same flawless thing, silence. And it stretches down every hallway, over every bed, into every corner of a country that mistakes stillness for healing. You see one woman smile too wide, too still, and you feel the unease. It's the kind of smile that looks practiced, like it was taught rather than felt. Her lips stretch perfectly, her teeth show neatly, but her eyes don't move. They stay fixed on nothing, glazed over in that strange middle distance where no one can reach her. She sits in a chair beside the window, bathed in soft hospital light that makes her look almost holy, like a saint in a faded painting. But you know holiness isn't supposed to look this hollow. A nurse adjusts the woman's blanket and says something cheerful, her tone too bright, too rehearsed. The woman keeps smiling, even after the nurse steps away. The corners of her mouth tremble slightly, as though the muscles have forgotten what to do when they're not being told. You wonder if she's cold, or if she even knows she's here. The smile doesn't fade. It just sits there unblinking, unwavering, unnatural. Around her, the ward hums quietly with the sounds of order. The click of shoes, the rustle of clipboards, the steady hum of fluorescent lights. Everything feels under control, almost peaceful, if you don't look too closely. But that smile ruins it. It doesn't belong in a peaceful world. It's too sharp, too precise, like a mask carved to fit perfectly over something broken. You glance at the file clipped to the end of her bed. Her name is written neatly at the top, followed by a list of symptoms that sound more like character traits: melancholia, anxiety, agitation, words that once meant a person was simply feeling too much. Now they're diagnoses, boxes to be checked, problems to be solved. You imagine her before all this, maybe laughing too loud at a dinner party, crying too easily at the movies, getting angry at the wrong time. Someone probably told her she was being dramatic. Someone probably said, "Why can't you just calm down?" And now she is calm, permanently. Freeman passes by her bed, clipboard in hand, whistling that same old tune that never quite hits the right notes. He pauses when he sees her, tilting his head slightly. "Beautiful result," he says, his voice soft, admiring. "Look how serene." He turns to the nurse, smiling like a proud teacher. You can always tell when the procedure takes perfectly. It's in the eyes. But it isn't in the eyes. It's in the absence of them, the way they've stopped searching, stopped noticing, stopped being windows to anything. You wonder if he really believes what he's saying, or if belief stopped mattering a long time ago. The nurse nods and writes something on her chart. No one mentions the way the woman's fingers twitch beneath the blanket, or how her smile falters for half a second before returning, locked in place like a photograph. Outside, the sun has started to set, casting long amber streaks across the floor. The light reaches the woman's face, and for a moment, her expression changes. It's subtle, almost imperceptible, a tightening around the mouth, a flicker of something behind the eyes. It's gone before you can name it, replaced again by that impossible smile. But for a second, you swear you saw her trying to surface, like a diver running out of air. The nurse returns with a tray of pills, her voice gentle, the way someone talks to a child. "Time for your medication, sweetheart," she says. The woman doesn't blink. The nurse presses the glass of water to her lips, and the woman drinks automatically, the way a plant absorbs sunlight passively, obediently. When it's done, the nurse pats her hand and moves on. The woman's smile doesn't waver. You take one last look before turning away. The air feels colder here, heavier somehow, like the room is holding its breath. The woman's smile follows you in the reflection of the glass door, a faint, ghostly shimmer that looks almost like happiness if you don't stare too long. But when you do, when you really let yourself see it, you understand what's wrong. It isn't serenity. It isn't healing. It's a mask that's been nailed in place. It's what happens when the world decides that quiet is more beautiful than truth. And as you walk down the hall, past rows of smiling faces that never blink, the silence feels louder than anything you've ever heard. Freeman becomes a celebrity. His patients become statistics. You see his face everywhere: newspapers, magazines, the evening news. The man with the steady hands and the easy smile. The miracle worker, the pioneer. Reporters follow him down hospital corridors like he's a movie star, scribbling notes as he speaks about science and salvation. He wears his confidence like a lab coat, crisp and spotless, untouched by doubt. When he talks, people listen, not because they understand him, but because they want to believe him. He makes madness sound solvable, like an algebra problem instead of a cry for help. He gives lectures to packed auditoriums, waving his ice pick like a baton as he describes the wonders of his method. The audience laughs at his jokes, gasps at his precision, claps at his optimism. He makes brain surgery look easy, quick, bloodless, humane. It's a simple thing, really, he says, as though peace of mind could be achieved with a few flicks of the wrist. He talks about his patients with the fond detachment of a man discussing machinery. He never says their names, only numbers, categories, outcomes. 80% improved, he says proudly, and the crowd murmurs approval, jotting down the statistic as if it were a gospel truth. He loves the attention. He thrives on it. Fame fills the air around him like static, sparking wherever he goes. He travels from hospital to hospital, city to city, giving interviews between procedures. He signs books, poses for photographs, shakes hands with politicians. The newspapers call him America's doctor, and for a while, he believes it. He starts to dress the part: tailored suits, silk ties, polished shoes that squeak faintly on the tile floors. Every step he takes sounds like progress. Meanwhile, the people he's operated on fade quietly into the background. Their stories are reduced to data points, footnotes in his success. You can find them in hospital records, their names replaced by patient IDs, their emotions reduced to check marks: improved, unchanged, deceased. They don't get the front pages or the flashbulbs. Their piece doesn't photograph well. One of them sits by a window in a state hospital miles away, watching snow fall through the bars. Her hands twitch in her lap, her lips forming silent words she no longer remembers. Her family sends letters that the nurses read aloud, even though she doesn't respond. She's better, they say to themselves, because anything else would be unbearable. Another spends his days stacking wooden blocks, then unstacking them, then stacking them again. The doctors call him docile. The word used to mean gentle. Now it means erased. Somewhere in the next ward, a teenage boy stares at his reflection in the metal tray beside his bed, not recognizing the face that looks back. His parents visit once a month, smiling too hard, saying things like, "You look good, son," because that's what they've been told to say. Freeman doesn't see any of this. Or maybe he does, but he's learned not to linger. The human mind, he insists, must be studied, not pitied. The stage lights have made him immune to shadows. When a reporter asks him about complications, he waves it off with a laugh. "You can't make an omelet without breaking a few shells," he says, and the audience laughs with him, relieved to find the horror funny. He measures his success in miles and headlines, not in lives. His car, his lobotomobile, becomes an extension of his ego, rolling through towns like a traveling circus of redemption. Wherever it goes, people gather to watch him work. Mothers clutch their children. Veterans shake his hand. The cameras roll as he tilts the patient's head, hums his tune, and makes another incision into the American psyche. At night, when the lights dim and the crowds disperse, the hospitals echo with a different kind of silence, the kind left behind when too many voices have been turned down to zero. But Freeman sleeps soundly. In his dreams, the applause never ends. He sees his name in bold print, his face on the cover of Time, his legacy etched into history. And somewhere far from the spotlight, in wards filled with quiet faces and forgotten names, his miracles sit in straight-backed chairs, staring at nothing, smiling that same empty smile. The world calls them cured. The records call them successes. But if you listen closely, beneath all the praise and paper, you can almost hear the truth, humming like a distant radio signal. Progress, after all, has a way of drowning out the people it leaves behind. You travel with him on the road, past neon diners and skeptical surgeons. The lobotomobile hums beneath you like a loyal beast, its engine coughing up miles of cracked highway and the smell of gasoline. The car is packed with everything Freeman needs to change a life: scalpels, gauze, an ice pick or two, and enough confidence to fill the entire back seat. He drives with one hand on the wheel and the other gesturing mid-story, like the road itself is listening. The radio plays softly, big band music fading in and out beneath the static, and he hums along, off-key but unbothered. The country unrolls outside the window in shades of beige and exhaustion. Motels glow faintly in the distance, their signs flickering like promises no one intends to keep. Every town looks the same. A diner, a post office, a small hospital with a big waiting room. Freeman pulls in, parks close to the entrance, and steps out like a visiting celebrity. He smooths his tie, checks his reflection in the rearview mirror, and grins. He loves the way people look at him when he says the word doctor. It's not reverence. Exactly, it's faith. Inside, the administrators greet him like a savior. They shake his hand, offer him coffee, ask how many patients he can see before lunch. He tells them he's improving the process faster now, more efficient. We'll clear the ward in a day, he says, and they beam at him like he's invented mercy. The nurses hover at the edges of the room, polite but uneasy. They've heard stories about him, about the ice pick through the eye socket. But no one dares question the man who promises peace. You sit quietly as he sets up his tools, humming that same tune you've heard 100 times. He lays the instruments out on a metal tray, each one catching the light with a sterile gleam. The patients are brought in one by one, some calm, some shaking, some already too numb to protest. Freeman talks to each of them with the warmth of a salesman, a man who knows that confidence can do half the work. "You'll feel better soon," he says, his voice smooth as glass. When the procedure starts, the room changes. The hum of conversation fades, replaced by the soft, deliberate rhythm of metal against bone. Freeman's movements are quick, almost graceful, like a musician finding his tempo. The nurses avert their eyes. The administrators smile nervously, and then it's over. The patient blinks, still breathing, still human, but different. "Another success," Freeman says cheerfully, wiping his hands. Afterward, you drive again. The towns blur together, their names change, but the desperation doesn't. Each place greets him like he's bringing rain to a drought. He never stays long enough to see the results. By the time the effects set in, he's already halfway to the next hospital, the next crowd, the next miracle. You start to notice the pattern. The same speeches, the same applause, the same quiet unease that follows him out the door. One evening, you stop at a roadside diner, the kind with chrome stools and pie that tastes like sugar and regret. Freeman orders black coffee and a slice of lemon meringue. The waitress recognizes him from the papers. "You're that brain doctor," she says, eyes wide with admiration. He laughs modestly, pretends to be embarrassed, then launches into a story about his revolutionary method. People from nearby booths turn to listen. For a moment, it feels like you're watching a magician reveal the secret to happiness over pie and cigarettes. Outside, the neon buzzes, reflecting off the windshield of the Lobotomobile. Freeman talks about expansion, about bringing the operation to schools, prisons, orphanages. "Everyone deserves peace," he says, his tone bright, unwavering. You look at him and realize he doesn't see the faces anymore, just numbers, charts, potential. The road ahead is endless, and he intends to conquer every inch of it. You keep driving through the night, past empty fields and radio towers blinking in the dark. The hum of the tires lulls you into a strange calm. In the passenger seat, Freeman flips through his notes, mumbling about perfection, about destiny. You catch his reflection in the window, his eyes gleaming, his smile fixed, the headlights stretching endlessly before him. Somewhere far behind, in the hospitals he's left behind, the lights burn low. The patients sit quietly in their beds, their minds forever altered, their families whispering prayers that sound suspiciously like doubt. But out here, on the open road, there's only the hum of the car, the faint smell of bleach on his hands, and the steady rhythm of a man convinced he's saving the world one ice pick at a time. He performs hundreds in a week, collecting brains like autographs. You watch him move through hospitals like a man on tour, his name printed in programs, his schedule booked solid. The nurses can't keep up. The orderlies whisper that he never sleeps. Each day starts the same coffee, confidence, and the low hum of fluorescent lights, waking up for another round of miracles. He calls it progress. The rest of the world calls it genius. And no one dares to ask how many miracles it takes before it stops feeling like one. He works fast now, faster than any surgeon has a right to. 10 minutes a patient, sometimes less. He hums as he works, his fingers steady, his rhythm perfect. Tap, slide, wipe, smile. The sound of the hammer against the pick becomes a kind of punctuation, marking the end of suffering and the start of silence. He's not just a doctor anymore, he's a conductor, orchestrating calm. Each patient is another note in his growing symphony of stillness. Hospitals line up to host him. Small town wards, city clinics, veterans' hospitals, they all want a piece of the miracle. The administrators beam for the cameras, shaking his hand, boasting about how many lives he's changed. Dr. Freeman's results speak for themselves, they say, and they do. The results speak softly, mechanically, in voices that sound almost human but never quite reach emotion. The rooms fill with patients who don't cry, don't shout, don't question. Peace has never been so efficient. You start to notice the details, the small tremors in his hand that he hides by tightening his grip, the dark circles beneath his eyes, the way his smile lingers a second too long after each procedure. He tells jokes between operations, laughing too loudly, brushing off fatigue with the same ease he brushes blood from his tools. 100 today, he says once, grinning. A record. He says it like he's talking about hitting home runs, not hammering through skulls. The nurses move like clockwork around him, trained to anticipate every gesture. One holds the head, one steadies the tray, one wipes the floor. The smell of bleach never fades. It clings to everything: his hands, his coat, the walls themselves. When the procedure ends, he pats the patient's shoulder with that same rehearsed warmth. There, he says, better already. The nurses exchange looks but say nothing. They've learned that silence is the only safe response. Outside the operating room, families gather in waiting areas, clutching purses and newspapers, praying quietly for deliverance. They call him the doctor who fixes the mind, whispering the title like it's divine. They don't see the trail of bandaged faces leaving through the back doors, or the way some patients forget their own names before nightfall. Freeman calls those adjustment periods. He writes it neatly on his charts, underlines it once, and moves on to the next name. At the end of the day, his shoes click down the hall as he counts the day's total: 57, 64, 73. He records each number like a victory, the proof of his dedication. He likes the way they sound in his mouth: round, solid, impressive. To him, each one is a life saved from chaos. But in the quiet after he leaves, the hospital halls echo with the soft shuffle of slippers, the murmurs of patients who don't know where they are or why they can't remember who they used to be. He begins to keep souvenirs, photographs, charts, even a few preserved, slides of brain tissue, each one carefully labeled. For teaching, he says, though there's something possessive in the way he handles them. He keeps them organized in neat stacks, flipping through them late at night like old friends. They are proof of his greatness, the evidence of a man who dared to cut where others hesitated. The press follows him relentlessly, writing about his speed, his bravery, his fearless compassion. The articles never mention the cost. They don't mention the patients who never woke up, or the ones who did but never spoke again. To the world, he's still the man who tamed madness with a flick of the wrist. And when he finally leaves each town, the hospitals feel emptier somehow. The noise doesn't come back. The laughter doesn't return. Only the silence remains polite, sterile, obedient. Freeman drives on to the next destination, the next miracle, the next crowd, waiting to be convinced. The lobotomobile rattles along the open road, filled with tools, records, and the faint metallic smell of triumph. He hums as he drives, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel in time with the rhythm only he can hear. Each note, each tap, each name, another autograph in the collection, another soul filed neatly under progress. The medical board starts to notice, but public approval is louder. You can feel the tension growing quietly beneath the applause, like a crack under fresh paint. The doctors in their pressed coats and polished shoes begin to murmur in hallways, behind doors, over cigarettes. Words like reckless and unethical drift through the smoke. But out beyond the hospitals, the crowds are still clapping, still writing letters, still calling him a hero. Freeman has become untouchable not because he's right, but because people need him to be. He doesn't hear the whispers, or maybe he does, and simply chooses to ignore them. When he walks into a room, conversation stops. He has the confidence of a man who has already written his own obituary and decided it will be flattering. He talks about progress, about freedom from pain, about how the old guard fears innovation. They're afraid of change, he says, his smile easy, his tone dismissive. The reporters nod along, pens scratching eagerly. He knows how to charm them, he always has. The medical board sends polite letters first, then less polite ones. They use phrases like ethical oversight and peer review. Freeman waves them away. Bureaucrats, he says, love their rules more than their patients. When one hospital tries to slow him down, he takes his show elsewhere. There's always another town, another ward, another audience, willing to believe that salvation can be achieved in under 10 minutes. He schedules demonstrations to prove his success. You watch him glide through them like a performer rehearsing a favorite scene. He greets the patients warmly, hums as he works, and narrates the process with the enthusiasm of a teacher unveiling a miracle. The observers, doctors, journalists, even a few politicians nod and take notes. The medical board may have doubts, but the public wants a savior, and Freeman looks the part. In the newspapers, the articles still shine. Doctor brings hope to the hopeless. Madness defeated by science. They print his photo with every story, his chin lifted, his eyes bright, his hand resting on a patient's shoulder like a father proud of his child. People cut out the articles and tape them to their refrigerators. They send him thank you letters written in careful cursive. A woman writes that her husband hasn't raised his voice in weeks. Another says her sister finally sleeps through the night. The testimonies pour in like gospel, drowning out the doctors who try to warn them. Behind closed doors, the board meets again. The room smells of coffee and old paper. Someone reads out the latest report. 2 deaths this month. Several adverse outcomes. Another clears his throat and suggests suspension. A third insists they can't act yet. The man is too popular. We'll look like fools, he says, if we move against him now. They decide to wait. Waiting always feels safer than confronting a storm. Meanwhile, Freeman hosts a radio interview. His voice floats through living rooms across the country, smooth and confident. Fear, he says, is the greatest illness of all, and I'm here to cure it. The host laughs, the audience applauds, and somewhere a surgeon listening in grips his coffee cup a little too tightly. The board may have rules, but Freeman has charisma, and in 1,950 seconds America, charisma trumps caution every time. At conferences, his peers challenge him, their questions sharp but quiet. He answers them with jokes, with charm, with numbers that sound impressive but never quite add up. When one doctor asks about his lack of surgical training, he smiles and says, "The brain doesn't care about diplomas." The crowd laughs. The skeptic looks down. Freeman wins again, not with evidence, but with certainty. You start to see the cracks widening, though no one else seems to. There are too many patients, too few recoveries, too many smiles that don't reach the eyes. But the applause keeps coming, louder every week, drowning out the doubts, the deaths, the data. Even the hospitals that once hesitated now beg for his presence. Funding follows fame, and fame follows Freeman. He drives the lobotomobile through the night, headlights slicing through the dark. The roads stretch endlessly ahead, the radio humming faintly under his off-key whistle. Behind him, the medical board drafts another letter. In it, they use the word investigation. He'll receive it in a few days, toss it aside, and keep driving. The noise of approval will protect him, at least for now. And as the sun rises over another small town waiting for their miracle, you realize the truth that everyone else is too. Dazzled to see once a man becomes a symbol, the facts stop mattering. The board can argue, the doctors can protest, but symbols don't answer to science. They answer to belief. And belief, especially the desperate kind, is always the loudest voice in the room. You witness his final demonstration, where something goes wrong. The air in the auditorium feels electric, charged with the kind of expectation that only comes before miracles or disasters. Rows of folding chairs line the room, filled with doctors in crisp coats and journalists holding notebooks that already smell like ink and scandal. The lights hum overhead, too bright, too white. Freeman stands at the front, his sleeves rolled to the elbow, smiling that same calm, unbreakable smile. He's older now, a little slower, but no one dares to notice. He looks around the room like a conductor surveying an orchestra that's already tuned to his rhythm. The patient is wheeled in a woman in her early 30s, her hair pinned neatly, her face blank with a trust that doesn't feel earned. She doesn't look frightened. Maybe she's too tired for fear, or maybe she's already halfway somewhere else. Freeman pats her hand reassuringly and says the words that have become his mantra, "You'll feel better soon." The audience murmurs approval. They've heard the stories, the numbers, the testimonies. They've seen the headlines. This is supposed to be another triumph, another headline for the scrapbook. He begins his lecture, pacing slightly as he talks about neural pathways and emotional disturbances. His tone is smooth, rehearsed, more performance than medicine. The key, he says, tapping the side of his temple, is access. He picks up the ice pick polished, gleaming under the harsh light, and holds it up for everyone to see. A simple tool for a complicated problem. A ripple of laughter passes through the crowd. He loves that sound. It tells him they're still on his side. You watch as he leans over the patient, his movements slower than usual, his hands trembling just enough to notice. He hums quietly, the same offbeat tune that has followed him from hospital to hospital, as if the song itself keeps him steady. The hammer comes next, small and silver, the sound of its weight testing the silence. A nurse glances toward the door. Another looks at the floor. Freeman positions the pick just above the eye, the gesture precise, almost elegant. Then comes the tap. Light, delicate, familiar. The sound echoes through the room like a dropped coin. He pauses, checks his alignment, then taps again, a little harder. The patient's body tenses. Someone in the audience coughs. Freeman doesn't notice, or pretends not to. He's explaining his method as he works, narrating his own genius. "You'll find the resistance right about here," he says, pushing just slightly more than usual. And then everything changes. There's a sound, not loud, but wrong. A sharp crack, too sudden, too deep. The patient jerks violently. Her arms twitch, her breathing falters, her head lolls to one side. For a moment, no one moves. Freeman freezes, his hand still gripping the instrument, his eyes fixed on the spot where brilliance just slipped into horror. The nurse beside him whispers something, but her voice breaks halfway through. The woman's body goes still, completely still. The silence that follows is unbearable. You can hear the flicker of the fluorescent lights, the hum of the air vents, the shuffle of a single shoe against the tile. Freeman straightens slowly, his face pale, his eyes wide in disbelief. "Sometimes," he begins, his voice shaky, "there are anomalies." The audience doesn't write this down. They just stare. The smell of antiseptic feels stronger now, heavier, clinging to the air like guilt. He tries to recover, to explain, to laugh it off. Every great innovation, he says weakly, has its risks. But his words hang there, empty, swallowed by the weight of what everyone has just seen. The nurses move in quickly, covering the patient with a sheet, their faces expressionless, their hands trembling. Freeman sets the ice pick down carefully on the tray. His fingers leave small red smudges where he touches the metal. A few people stand, muttering to each other, not quite meeting his eyes. The journalists close their notebooks. No one claps this time. Freeman looks out at them as if waiting for forgiveness, or at least understanding. But there's nothing there now, only distance. He opens his mouth to speak, then closes it again. The silence is final. When you step outside, the air feels colder than it should. The reporters are already whispering, their voices quick and quiet. The story is no longer about the miracle man, it's about the accident, the danger, the man who went too far. Behind you, Freeman remains in the room, staring at the sheet-draped figure on the table. The ice pick still glints under the light, catching reflections that look like something burning. For the first time, he doesn't hum. He just stands there, motionless, as the applause that once followed him everywhere fades into something else entirely. An echo of a world that has finally, reluctantly, stopped believing. A patient doesn't wake up. Freeman keeps smiling for the cameras. The room smells faintly of burnt metal and formaldehyde, the kind of sterile scent that sticks to the back of your throat. The reporters shuffle in their seats, their notepads ready, the flashes already warming up. They've come for a miracle, for another headline about the man who tamed madness with a household tool. What they get instead is a silence that feels alive. The woman on the table isn't moving. Her chest should rise and fall, but it doesn't. Her hands lie flat against the sheets, pale and unmoving, the fingertips still smudged with ink from the form she signed that morning. You can almost hear the ink drying as the seconds stretch out. Freeman's voice falters mid-sentence, caught between confidence and confusion, like an actor who's forgotten his lines. The nurse beside him knows before anyone else. She looks at the patient's face, then at Freeman, then back again. Her lips press into a thin, terrified line. But Freeman doesn't stop. He can't. The cameras are still rolling. He clears his throat, adjusts his glasses, and smiles a smile that used to seem warm, now brittle under the glare of the lights. Sometimes, he says, his tone soft but rehearsed, the mind resists healing. He says it like a quote he's used before, the kind of line that sounds profound until you realize it doesn't mean anything. He keeps talking, explaining, demonstrating, gesturing at the lifeless body as though it might spring back to life out of politeness. No one in the room breathes properly. A few of the journalists glance at each other, uncertain whether they're witnessing science or something far uglier. One of them lowers his camera slowly, the click of the shutter dying in his hand. Another pretends to take notes but doesn't write a word. The silence grows so thick it feels like it might swallow the whole room. Freeman turns to the nurse. "Let's proceed," he says softly. It's not a suggestion, it's muscle memory, a command born from habit. She hesitates, her hands trembling slightly. "Doctor," she whispers. She's not. The rest of the sentence dissolves. The patient is gone, but the cameras are still here, and that seems to matter more. Freeman's jaw tightens, and for a moment you think he might stop, might finally see what everyone else does. But instead, he adjusts his tie and steps forward. He tells the reporters that sometimes patients take longer to stabilize. He calls it a normal response, a temporary delay, a phase. The words flow easily smooth, detached, practiced. His tone never cracks, though his hand brushes against the tray, and you notice it lingers there longer than it should. His knuckles whiten as he grips the edge, the only visible sign that something inside him knows this isn't another success story. Afterward, the reporters file out slowly, their eyes down, their expressions unreadable. No one claps. No one says thank you. The nurse quietly covers the woman's body with a sheet, tucking it around her shoulders like she's putting a child to bed. Freeman stands motionless for a long time, the sound of cameras still echoing faintly in the air. He looks at the shape beneath the sheet as though he can will it back, as though sheer belief might undo what his hands have done. But then, as if summoned by pride, the smile returns. It's smaller now, tighter, but it's there. When the hospital administrator walks in, Freeman greets him with the same firm handshake, the same carefully measured warmth. An unfortunate anomaly, he says quietly. Rare, almost unheard of. The administrator nods quickly, already planning how to word the press release. By the next morning, the newspapers run two versions of the story. One calls it a tragic mishap in an otherwise brilliant career. The other calls it proof that true innovation is never without risk. In both, Freeman's photograph appears beside the article, his face calm, his smile unchanged, his eyes hiding whatever might be left behind them. The woman's name is mentioned once, misspelled, before the story moves on to bigger things. You see him later, sitting alone in a hospital corridor, still wearing his coat, his fingers stained faintly red. He stares at them for a long time before rubbing them against his sleeve. When he stands to leave, he passes a mirror and pauses just long enough to straighten his collar. The smile returns again, weaker but determined, stitched across his face like armor. Outside, the flashbulbs are waiting, and he steps into them, like a man stepping onto a stage. The cameras fire, the questions come, and Freeman does what he always does. He smiles for history, pretending that nothing has gone wrong, pretending that the silence behind him doesn't mean anything at all. The newspapers go quiet. The applause fades. You can feel it in the way the phone stops ringing, in the way the mail comes lighter each day. No more invitations, no more interviews, no more polite applause at medical conferences. The world that once called him a genius now pretends not to recognize his name. His photo still hangs in a few hospital hallways, yellowed at the edges, but even those will come down soon enough. Progress doesn't like to remember its mistakes. Freeman keeps driving, though there's nowhere left to go. The lobotomobile rattles down empty highways, the paint chipped, the tires worn. The car that once carried hope now just carries silence. He still hums sometimes, out of habit, but the tune sounds thinner now, hollow, like the echo of something that used to mean more. The thermos on the seat beside him is cold. The maps in the glove compartment are creased from too much folding and unfolding. He keeps them anyway, as if the roads might still lead somewhere that needs him. In the cities, people whisper his name like a warning. Hospitals distance themselves quietly. New doctors take the stage, armed with new ideas, new machines, new words that promise healing without the sound of hammers. Electroconvulsive therapy, tranquilizers, talk therapy, softer tools for a gentler age. They don't mention him, not directly, but every paper they publish, every speech they give, carries the same unspoken message. We've moved on. He still believes, or tries to. When he looks at his old notes, the diagrams, the photographs, he tells himself it wasn't madness, it was mercy. The world wanted calm, and he gave it to them. But now calm looks like something else, and what he offered looks like ruin. He tells himself he was too early, too bold, too misunderstood. It's easier than admitting he went too far. Sometimes he visits hospitals unannounced, offering to demonstrate again. They decline politely, saying the schedule is full, the budget tight, the administration unavailable. The nurses glance away when he passes. They've heard the stories. They know how it ended. Back home, his instruments sit neatly in a drawer, their edges dulled, their purpose gone. The ice pick still gleams faintly in the light when he opens it, and for a moment, he almost smiles. Then he shuts it again, slowly, as though closing the lid on something that's still breathing. Outside, the world moves on without him. The headlines are about rockets, presidents and movie stars now. The word lobotomy starts to sound old-fashioned, like a relic from a stranger time. And in that fading, antiseptic silence, you realize that for the first time in years, the doctor who silenced thousands has finally joined them. The 1,950 seconds curtain of optimism begins to tear. It doesn't rip all at once. It frays slowly, at the corners first. The sheen of perfection, that pastel-colored calm America worked so hard to paint over its nerves, starts to peel in the sunlight. Housewives begin to whisper about the pills their doctors give them. Soldiers come home quieter than before, staring too long at nothing. The television shows the smiling families, the clean kitchens, the barbecues on Sunday but off-screen. The edges are curling. You can feel it, even if no one says it out loud. You drive through towns that once worshipped certainty, and now you see doubt in the billboards, in the eyes of the gas station attendant who tells you the price of hope just went up again. There's something brittle in the air, a kind of collective exhaustion that smells faintly of coffee and cigarette ash. The country is starting to realize that perfection costs more than anyone thought, and someone always pays in silence. The hospitals, once proud monuments of progress, begin to look different too. The wards are still painted the same cheerful mint green, but the laughter sounds forced, the corridors too quiet. The miracle cures of yesterday feel old now, a little embarrassing. People stop saying lobotomy out loud, as if the word itself might still cut. The posters about mental health get replaced with softer ones, all sunshine and slogans about tranquility. Behind the walls, though, the same patients sit in the same chairs, blinking slowly, waiting for something that never comes. You see it in the nurses' eyes, fatigue disguised as politeness. They still tidy the beds, still refill the water jugs, still smile when families visit, but they've stopped believing. You can tell by the way their voices drop when they talk about procedures, as if the word might wake the ghosts sleeping down the hall. The doctors don't meet your gaze anymore. Some leave the profession entirely, claiming burnout or conscience or family reasons. Others stay, pretending the silence means success. Freeman drives through this fading optimism like a relic that refuses to accept extinction. His once bright car now coughs dark smoke as it sputters down the highway. He still wears his suit, still polishes his shoes, still believes that one more demonstration might redeem everything. But even the reporters don't show up anymore. The public has moved on to tranquilizers, to therapy, to television cures for the mind. He's yesterday's miracle, and the world is suddenly allergic to yesterday. The magazines that once worshipped him now run stories about side effects, about ruined lives, about the thin line between treatment and tragedy. Headlines shift from hope and a hammer to the cost of quiet minds. The tone changes overnight, and the applause turns into whispers. The same people who once shook his hand now pretend not to know him. His letters go unanswered. His speeches get canceled. Progress, he learns, is a fair-weather friend. Outside the hospitals, America is getting louder. Jazz seeps from smoky bars. Teenagers dance like the world won't end. Writers start talking about alienation, disillusionment, the madness of conformity. The word peace doesn't mean what it used to. You can feel the shift in the air, in the way people walk faster, laugh harder, look away sooner. The facade is cracking, and everyone's pretending not to see it. You pass a house where a woman waters her perfect lawn, her smile pinned on like a badge. Inside, she hides a drawer full of little white pills. You pass a factory where the men clock out with tired eyes and talk about the news missiles, paranoia, and the strange idea that happiness might be a lie. You pass the church where someone prays not for salvation, but for numbness. The curtain doesn't fall with a bang. It sags, quietly, until one day you look around and realize it's gone. The pastel world has turned gray around the edges. The future isn't as shiny anymore. It has fingerprints on it, and they're all human, and somewhere, far from the lights, Freeman's car breaks down on a lonely stretch of road. The engine hisses, the horizon hums, and for the first time in years, there's no audience waiting. Just the sound of wind, rust, and a country waking up from its own anesthesia. You see survivors wandering the halls, vacant but calm. They move like sleepwalkers, their slippers whispering across the linoleum, their arms hanging loosely at their sides. Their faces are soft, untroubled, the kind of peace you can only get when someone else has taken the thinking out of it for you. In another time, in another story, they might look holy. Here, they just look empty. The hall smells faintly of bleach and boiled vegetables. The lights hum overhead, that steady fluorescent heartbeat that never changes. You walk slowly, careful not to make noise, but they don't react anyway. One woman sits on a bench, folding and unfolding a napkin in perfect rhythm. Her fingers move automatically, delicate and precise, as though she's still performing a task from her old life, setting a dinner table, tucking a child into bed. You want to ask her name, but you already know she wouldn't answer. The name is gone, filed away with all the other unnecessary details of who she used to be. A man stands by a window, staring out at a courtyard filled with sunlight. He doesn't blink. You follow his gaze and realize he's not looking at anything. He's just existing near the light, like a plant that doesn't know what it's supposed to do with it anymore. His hospital gown hangs open slightly at the neck, his skin pale against the fabric. Somewhere deep in his chest, a quiet breath rises and falls. That's all that moves now, the slow machinery of survival. Down another corridor, you find a small group gathered around a television. The screen shows a game show host shouting into a microphone, but the sound is turned off. The patients watch anyway, their eyes following the man's lips as if the movement alone carries meaning. A nurse passes through, adjusts the volume knob instinctively, then thinks better of it and turns it off again. Too stimulating, she murmurs. The patients don't react. Their stillness is total, the kind of calm that borders on haunting. In a room near the end of the hall, you find an old woman clutching a doll with missing eyes. She rocks it slowly, humming something tuneless under her breath. The nurse says she used to be a piano teacher, once known for her temper. Now her voice is a whisper, her anger long gone. She's one of the better ones, the nurse adds, as if that's supposed to be comforting. You nod, though you don't understand what better means here. Better at being quiet, maybe. Better at disappearing. Every so often, one of them smiles. It's never at you. It's some distant reflex, a shadow of who they were. The smiles come and go, mechanical and misplaced, like static interrupting an old radio broadcast. The doctors call it improvement. They use words like tranquil, content, adjusted. The charts are full of tidy phrases, each one designed to make the emptiness sound like healing. You stop at a nurse's station and glance at the logbook. The names repeat: Mary, Walter, Agnes, James. But the notes beside them are all the same. Stable, peaceful, unresponsive. The columns stretch endlessly, identical rows of serenity recorded in blue ink. You close the book, but the silence in the hall feels heavier now, like the air itself has memorized the pattern. Freeman's voice still echoes faintly through these walls, even if his body doesn't. You can almost hear it in the distance, that confident hum, that clipped tone of certainty. The patients are his legacy, the proof of his conviction. They are monuments carved not from stone, but from what's left of human will. You wonder if he'd call this success, or if the sight of them now would make even him hesitate. One of the patients shuffles past you, a young girl, maybe 18, her hair cut unevenly, her eyes glazed with something colder than exhaustion. She hums softly to herself, a single note, repeated again and again, like a lullaby that forgot where it was supposed to end. You feel her pass, but she never looks up. Her mind is somewhere else, someplace quieter, unreachable. The hallway stretches ahead, fluorescent lights flickering, the rhythm of footsteps unbroken. They all keep moving, slowly, endlessly, as if time has flattened here. Outside, the world has forgotten them, trading madness for television, trauma for pills, fear for the illusion of control. But here, in this sterile sanctuary of stillness, the survivors remain vacant, calm, and forever suspended between who they were and what they were made to be. Family members stop visiting. The miracle becomes a secret. At first, they come every Sunday, dressed in their church clothes, clutching flowers, and hope in equal measure. They bring crossword puzzles, favorite candies, small gifts wrapped in pastel paper. They sit beside the beds and talk softly about the weather, the neighbors, the garden, anything but what's happened. The patients smile politely, nodding in slow rhythm, their eyes wandering somewhere just beyond the room. The families tell themselves it's progress. They tell themselves silence is a kind of peace. But as the weeks turn into months, the visits grow shorter. The conversations become more strained, the smiles more forced. Someone always checks their watch first. "We'll be back soon," they promise, gathering coats and purses, the smell of outside air clinging to their clothes. The patients keep smiling even after the footsteps fade, even after the door clicks shut. They keep smiling long after no one is left to see it. Eventually, the flowers stop coming. The nurses toss the last wilted stems into the trash, their petals browned and papery, curling inward as if to hide from the light. The candy goes stale in the drawer. The magazines gather dust on the bedside tables, their covers frozen in time, presidents, movie stars, optimism. No one notices when the subscriptions lapse. The families tell themselves they're doing what's best. Some say it's too painful to visit. Others say their loved ones wouldn't recognize them anyway. It's easier, they decide, to remember them as they were, laughing, arguing, alive in a way that doesn't fit inside these walls. So they stop coming. They stop writing. They stop saying the names out loud. You walk the halls, and the absence feels louder than any sound. The empty chairs in the visitors' lounge sit in perfect rows, facing each other like two sides of a conversation no one will finish. The air smells faintly of disinfectant and loneliness. In one corner, a nurse folds linens in silence, her movements automatic. She hums without realizing it, the tune looping endlessly, a melody that never resolves. In the ward, the patients remain where they've always been sitting, staring, occasionally whispering to no one. They don't ask when their families are coming. They don't seem to remember there was ever anyone waiting for them at all. The miracle that once filled newspaper pages now lingers in the corners like a bad rumor. When new staff arrive, the older nurses warn them not to ask too many questions. It was different back then, they say. People didn't know better. The phrase repeats itself so often it becomes a spell, a way of keeping guilt from seeping through the walls. Sometimes, an envelope arrives in the mailroom, addressed in shaky handwriting. It's from a mother or a brother or a husband who couldn't quite let go. The letters are full of apologies, explanations, small talk about life, outside birthdays, weather, gardens. They always end the same way. "I hope you're doing better." The nurses never read the replies aloud. Most of them are blank. A few contain only one sentence. "Yes, I am fine." The newspapers don't print updates anymore. There's no audience for it, no appetite for tragedy that looks too much like complicity. The word lobotomy fades from public language, replaced by softer ones like therapy and treatment. The miracle becomes a ghost story doctors tell each other in low voices, a cautionary tale wrapped in the language of progress. It's easier that way. And still, the halls hum, the lights flicker, the patients breathe, eat, sleep, and wake. Their lives continue in that narrow space between existence and memory. They have been edited, rewritten into something society can live with but not look at directly. You linger by a window, watching the sunlight hit the glass in fractured patterns. Outside, the world has moved on. Children play on sidewalks. Cars roar down clean roads. Somewhere, families sit around dinner tables, talking about everything except the people who no longer fit the story. Inside, the miracle that once promised peace now sits quietly, forgotten but alive, tucked away in the sterile corners of a history too ashamed to name itself. The nurses dim the lights, close the curtains, and the silence folds itself neatly over the ward, hiding what's left of the miracle that no one wants to claim. Psychiatric medicine evolves. The scalpel gives way to pills. The transformation doesn't happen with fanfare. It creeps in quietly, disguised as progress. Hospitals replace their surgical trays with bottles, their operating rooms with consultation offices that smell faintly of coffee and bureaucracy. The word therapy becomes fashionable again, rebranded and shiny, as if empathy itself has been newly invented. Doctors trade their blood-stained gloves for prescription pads, and the world sighs with relief, pretending the last decade never happened. You watch as the new order takes shape. The same white coats, the same confident smiles, but now the miracles come in smaller doses, wrapped in foil, and sold under names that sound safe and hopeful. Thorazine, Librium, Milltown. Each pill promises calm, control, conformity. The advertisements show women in pearls and men in gray flannel suits, smiling in the soft glow of modern chemistry. Science can make you whole, they say, as if wholeness were something you could swallow with a glass of water. The doctors don't talk about lobotomies anymore. They avoid the word entirely, as though silence could sterilize it. The procedure becomes a ghost in the medical textbooks acknowledged, but only in the past tense, buried between Latin terms no one lingers on. Students nod politely during lectures, eager to move on to safer innovations. The scalpel, once a symbol of progress, now looks primitive, almost barbaric. But the impulse behind it, the desire to fix the mind by force, still lingers, disguised in softer language and cleaner methods. The new drugs make people manageable. They flatten the peaks and fill the valleys, smoothing out every rough edge that might make someone unpredictable. You'll feel more balanced, the doctors say. Balanced becomes the new blessed. Patients who once faced surgery now face medication schedules. Instead of scars, they get side effects: dry mouth, blurred vision, fatigue that seeps into their bones. The nurses distribute the pills with mechanical gentleness, their trays clinking like distant bells. It's progress, they say, and maybe it is progress in packaging, if not in philosophy. The world outside the hospitals adjusts accordingly. Families are told their loved ones will recover faster now, that the days of drastic measures are over. But the relief feels uneasy. The pills promise peace, yet no one seems particularly alive under them. At dinner tables, conversations, slow. Housewives smile through the haze of tranquilizers, their laughter polite but hollow. Men return home from offices and drink to wash down the residue of their own prescriptions. America calls it the age of tranquility, as if sedation were the natural conclusion of civilization. Pharmaceutical companies thrive. Their ads fill magazines, tucked between cigarette promotions and detergent miracles. For the overworked mind, one says, next to a picture of a woman resting her head on a white pillow. Another shows a man in a suit shaking hands with his boss, the caption promising confidence in capsule form. The message is clear. Happiness is chemical, suffering optional, and silence once again marketable. In hospitals, the once bustling surgical wards grow quiet. The instruments sit untouched, their metal dulled by time. The operating lamps are turned off, the floors swept clean, the ghosts of Freeman's era erased by the scent of antiseptic and reform. But if you stand still long enough, you can almost hear it, the faint echo of a hammer's tap, the hum of a man who believed he was curing the world one mind at a time. The tools have changed, but the dream hasn't. The quest to edit humanity continues, just with smoother edges and fewer headlines. You walk past a line of patients waiting for their prescriptions, each one holding a small paper cup, their eyes heavy but calm. They shuffle forward when called, swallow on command, and sit back down to wait for nothing in particular. No blood, no screams, no scars, just quiet compliance, measured in milligrams. Outside, the world spins faster. Neon lights blink over pharmacies and diners. Radios hum with new optimism, crooning about better living through chemistry. People start to believe that the mind, like a machine, can be tuned perfectly if you just find the right combination of wires and voltage, or now, the right combination of pills. And as the century turns, the scalpel gathers dust while the prescription pad grows heavy with ink. The methods have softened, the language has evolved, but the pursuit remains the same. To carve peace out of chaos, to silence the noise, to make the human mind behave. The only difference is that now, no one needs a hammer, just a glass of water. Freeman's career collapses, but his conviction never does. It happens slowly, almost politely, as if the world is trying not to embarrass him. First, the medical board suspends his hospital privileges. Then the universities stop inviting him to speak. The journalists who once followed him like disciples now write careful, mournful pieces about the dangers of unchecked innovation. His name becomes a cautionary tale told in lecture halls, spoken with the same tone used for mythological monsters and fallen gods. But Freeman doesn't see a fall. He sees misunderstanding. He sees cowardice. The world, he tells himself, just lost its nerve. He still wakes early, still irons his shirt, still hums the same tune as he shaves. His routines remain untouched, even if his reputation doesn't. He writes letters to editors, to hospitals, to colleagues who've stopped answering. They've abandoned the patient, he insists in neat, looping handwriting. We had the cure in our hands, and they let it slip away. He sends each envelope with the same hopeful precision, as though one of them might finally open a door back into relevance. Most come back unopened. The rest are quietly filed under unsolicited. He starts traveling again, not as a celebrity this time, but as a man trying to prove the world wrong. The Lobotomobile still runs, though the paint is faded and the backseat rattles with his old instruments. He drives to small towns that don't read medical journals, where desperate families still whisper his name like a secret prayer. They meet him at motels or borrowed clinics, offering trembling hands and stories about sleepless nights, violent outbursts, broken minds. Freeman listens, nodding with the empathy of a man who still believes. "You've come to the right place," he says softly. The words sound practiced, like muscle memory. He still performs the procedure, even after it's banned. Quieter now, in back rooms and converted offices. He sterilizes his tools with rubbing alcohol from a grocery store and wipes his hands on the same white handkerchief he's carried for years. He hums to himself, as he always has. The patients trust him because he looks like someone who believes in what he's doing. That kind of faith is contagious, even when it's dangerous. The results aren't miracles anymore. Sometimes they never were. But he keeps track of them anyway, scribbling notes in small weathered journals. He writes about improvements, about remarkable calm, about stability restored. The language has softened, but the intent hasn't. He refuses to see failure. He tells himself the others botched his method, that his hands alone know the right rhythm, the right pressure, the right touch. The problem isn't the operation, it's everyone else. His sons stop visiting, his colleagues stop speaking his name, but the letters keep coming from families who've run out of options. They're written in shaky penmanship, filled with desperation and faith in equal measure. "Can you help my daughter? Can you fix my husband? Please, doctor. You're the only one who understands." He answers them all, He's older now. His hands shake when he holds the ice pick, but he steadies them the way he always did, with certainty. The certainty that he is right, that history will come around eventually, that all pioneers are mocked before they're praised. He still believes in his own mythology. To him, this isn't decline, it's perseverance. By the time the final hospital refuses him entry, he's a relic in his own lifetime. His license is gone, his titles stripped, his procedures outlawed. But when people ask if he has any regrets, he smiles that familiar, easy smile. None, he says. The world just wasn't ready. He dies quietly, far from the noise that once followed him, surrounded not by acclaim or condemnation, but by the hum of machines and the faint smell of antiseptic. The papers mention his passing in small columns, using words like controversial and infamous. No one calls him a hero anymore, but if he could read it, he'd find comfort in the fact that they still remember him at all, because in his mind, that's what mattered, the persistence of the idea, the belief that he was the man who looked inside the brain and found the switch for peace. The world moved on, the science evolved, the silence he created turned into history, but even as the curtain closed, Freeman stood behind it, humming softly to himself, convinced that someday someone would pull it open again. He dies convinced he saved lives, surrounded by silence. It isn't the kind of silence that feels peaceful. It's the dense, echoless kind, the kind that gathers in the corners of rooms where too much has gone unsaid. The hospital where he spends his final days doesn't know what to do with him. The nurses speak in lowered voices, unsure whether to treat him like a patient, a pioneer, or a ghost. His name isn't in the textbooks anymore, but it still floats through the halls like a rumor. They all know who he was, even if they don't say it out loud. The man who opened the mind with an ice pick now lies still, tethered to the soft rhythm of machines that keep him company. His hands, once so steady, now tremble under thin blankets. There's a flicker of pride left in him, faint but stubborn. He still believes he was right. Even here, in the fluorescent half-light of his ending, he rehearses his defense silently, the same speech he's been giving for years. They just didn't understand, he whispers to no one. They were afraid of progress. The photographs on his bedside table tell a story the world no longer wants to hear. Smiling nurses, polished instruments, rows of patients sitting upright in neat hospital beds. Their eyes look empty, but he remembers them differently. He remembers them calm, composed, free from the chaos that once filled their minds. He remembers the applause, the headlines, the letters from grateful families. He edits out the rest, the tremors, the vacant stares, the screams that came before the silence. His journals are stacked neatly on a chair beside him, every page filled with careful handwriting. There's something almost beautiful about the precision of it, his neat blue ink documenting decades of conviction. Improvement observed, one line reads. Reduction in agitation. Return to peaceful state. There are no entries about the aftermath. No mention of the families who stopped writing, the hospitals that turned him away, the children who looked at him like a stranger. He doesn't see absence as failure. To him, stillness is victory. The nurses check his vitals quietly. They move around him like curators, tending to a fragile exhibit, something important but uncomfortable to look at too long. When they whisper his name, it's with an odd mixture of reverence and pity. They know he believed in what he did. They know he never doubted. That's the part that unsettles them most. You imagine what it must be like inside his head now. Does he see the faces of his patients? Do they visit him in dreams? Hundreds of them, sitting in endless rows, blinking slowly in unison? Or does he only see the bright, sterile light of the operating room, the clean gleam of the instrument in his hand, the way it caught the reflection of his own certainty? Maybe his final thought is the same one he's always had, that he was the only one brave enough to fix what others were too timid to touch. Outside his window, the world has changed. Completely. The streets hum with color televisions and new cars, the suburbs gleaming with the illusion of perfection. Psychiatry has moved on to pills and therapy couches, and the lobotomy has been tucked away in history's locked drawer. But here, in this quiet room, time still belongs to him. The man who once drove across America in a car filled with scalpels and hope lies in the middle of his own creation, tranquil, disconnected, unshaken by the chaos he left behind. There's no funeral crowd when he goes. A few colleagues send flowers, more out of habit than affection. The newspapers give him a paragraph, somewhere near the bottom of the page, sandwiched between an ad for vacuum cleaners and a story about a new kind of computer. Dr. Walter Freeman, pioneer of psychosurgery, dead at 76, it reads. Controversial figure, advocated frontal lobotomy for the treatment of mental illness. That's it. No legacy, no redemption. Just a neat summary of chaos written in a single column inch. But if he could read it, he'd smile. Because even that, especially that, means he mattered. It means the world still remembers the man who dared to open the mind and call it healing. And in his final moment, that's all he ever wanted. To be remembered as the one who brought calm, who reached into the human brain and made the noise stop. So he closes his eyes, and for the first time in decades, the world outside forgets to hum. The machines flatten their rhythm into one continuous note, and the silence that follows feels almost familiar, like the final echo of his life's work, still convincing itself it was mercy. You read the reports decades later, 20,000 lobotomies in the U.S., and alone. The number sits on the page like a stone, heavy and smooth, impossible to hold without feeling its weight. The articles don't shout, they whisper, the way history always does when it's ashamed. The photographs are black and white, grainy, but the faces are clear. Enough. Men in hospital gowns, women in housecoats, children with blank stares that never seem to end. Each one catalogued as progress, each incision a victory. The tone of the old reports is almost cheerful science in its Sunday best, smiling for the camera, certain it's making the world a better place. You scroll through one of Freeman's surviving films. It's silent, the way most horrors are. He moves quickly, efficiently, demonstrating his method with the calm of someone teaching a cooking class. The nurses hand him instruments with mechanical grace. The audience watches, rapt. There's no blood, not really, just the faint shadow of it, the kind that lingers in your imagination long after the screen fades to black. The next clip shows him with a patient, a woman who can't be more than 30. Her hair is pinned back neatly, as if that small order might make up for the chaos to come. He places his hand on her shoulder, reassuring, almost fatherly. Then the scene cuts, and when it returns, she's sitting upright, staring into nothing. The doctors beam. Successful outcome, the caption reads. You watch her blink, slowly, as though each motion is being remembered rather than felt. It's the kind of blinking you can't unsee. You close the laptop, but the silence stays. The idea that all this happened not in some medieval dungeon, but in hospital rooms with crisp sheets and bright lights. Ordinary places, clean places. You picture the smell of antiseptic, the buzz of fluorescent bulbs, the steady shuffle of nurses' shoes. Progress always smells the same: bleach, coffee, and something faintly metallic underneath. You read the testimonies next. The children of patients, the husbands, the wives. They write about people who returned home, changed, quieter, softer, sometimes sweeter, but never quite there. She just sits now, one son says. She doesn't cry anymore. She doesn't laugh either. Another remembers his father calling, his mother peaceful, as though stillness were the same thing as happiness. You trace your finger along the lines of their words, the way you might trace the edges of a scar. The numbers grow bigger the more you read. 20,000 procedures, give or take. Each one approved, applauded, published. Hospitals competed for record-breaking counts. Freeman himself performed more than 3,500, sometimes dozens in a single day. At the time, it was considered efficient, compassionate even. The country wanted an answer, and he offered one that fit on a tray. The press clippings from the 1,950 seconds tell a different story than the ones written now. A miracle of modern medicine, one headline boasts. The ice pick that cures the soul. You almost laugh, but the sound dies before it reaches your throat. You can't decide what's worse, the act itself, or the way it was wrapped in good intentions. There's a quote from Freeman, buried in one of the old interviews. You read it twice, just to be sure. The operation frees them from their pain. It gives them a chance to be content. The word content lingers. It's such a small, bland word for something that erased so much. You wonder if he ever looked back and saw what contentment really looked like. Thousands of faces frozen halfway between living and nothing at all. When you look at the photographs again, you start to notice the small details. The bandages slightly askew, the way a nurse looks at the floor, the way light hits the surgical tray, like it's shining on a relic. The confidence in the air is gone now, replaced by something brittle, like a mirror about to crack. The world has since declared it a tragedy, but in the frozen smiles of those old black and white frames, you can still feel how proud they were. You close the last file, but the stories follow you. They drift into the quiet corners of your mind, the same way they once drifted into history books, easy to overlook until you realize they were written by the victors of certainty. You think about all those minds stilled, edited, simplified, and how it was all done in the name of peace. 20,000 times, a hammer tapped gently against bone, and no one screamed loud enough to stop it. The world calls it barbaric now, but once, it was the future. You can almost hear the excitement in the old newsreels, cheerful narrators announcing a breakthrough in mental health, their voices crackling over the hum of film projectors. The camera pans across clean hospital corridors, white coats gleaming like armor. Doctors pose with instruments that look like science fiction relics, proud and smiling, as if they've discovered fire again. You know what's coming, but part of you still feels the pull of that optimism, that earnest belief that cutting into the mind could somehow fix what was broken inside it. In those days, the word barbaric would have sounded dramatic, even rude. They saw themselves as explorers of the human soul, modern pioneers armed not with muskets, but with scalpels. The country wanted answers, not philosophy. And here came a man who promised to make sadness disappear in 10 minutes flat. No long recovery, no messy emotions, no therapy sessions digging through memories, just efficiency. American-style salvation, delivered with a steady hand and a reassuring smile. You imagine the first time a family heard the word lobotomy spoken with hope instead of fear. The relief in their voices, the fragile joy of thinking their loved one might finally be free from the chaos that haunted their mind. They didn't see brutality. They saw deliverance. They saw headlines that used words like miracle and cure and restoration of the human spirit. The science magazines called it the dawn of a new era, one where pain could be edited, where the brain could be made obedient. Progress always starts with words like those soft, noble, clean. Now the word makes people flinch. It's used in movies to show cruelty, in essays to explain arrogance, in conversations to mark the border between then and now. But it wasn't cruelty that built it. It was faith. Faith in the idea that suffering had a mechanical cause, that the human mind could be tuned like a radio if only you found the right frequency. People forget how comforting that belief must have been. The world after 2 wars wanted order, not mystery. Lobotomy offered exactly that, a way to silence the noise. The doctors believed they were heroes. You can see it in their notes, in the careful handwriting, the precise language of men convinced that neatness equals morality. Patient improved, reduction in anxiety, notable tranquility, each phrase a small monument to their certainty. They weren't trying to harm, they were trying to help. The line between the two is always invisible until history decides to draw it. You think about how easily the future becomes the past, how every innovation begins with applause and ends with an apology, how the same impulse that made them press the ice pick against bone still drives people now. This need to fix, to improve, to dominate the messy, unpredictable thing that is being human. Today, it's algorithms and medications instead of scalpels, but the language hasn't changed much. Optimization, balance, calm. The pursuit continues, dressed in cleaner clothes. If you listen closely to those old recordings, you can hear something beneath the cheer, a faint hum of discomfort, the sound of doubt politely clearing its throat. A nurse hesitates before handing over the instrument. A patient blinks twice before the camera cuts. A journalist pauses just long enough to wonder what it means to be cured at the cost of feeling. But those questions never made it to print. The world was too eager for triumph. Now the word hangs in the air like an accusation and a warning all at once. Barbaric. It's the label that absolves the present by condemning the past. We look back at them and think ourselves wiser, kinder, more civilized. But maybe the truth is simpler and less flattering. Maybe every age thinks it's the future until it isn't. Maybe every miracle looks monstrous when the light changes. You close the last page of the report, and the silence that follows feels dense, almost alive. The photos stare back at you, Freeman, with his confident grin. The nurses lined up like soldiers, the patients frozen, mid-smile. In their faces, you see both horror and hope, fused together in a single, unblinking expression. The world calls it barbaric now, because it can afford to. But once, it was the future, and everyone believed it was mercy. You think about what desperation makes people believe. How easy it is to mistake surrender for hope when pain has worn you thin. The newspapers, the experts, the men in white coats, all of them promised salvation, and when you're drowning, you don't ask what the rope is made of. You just grab it. Maybe that's what everyone was doing back then, grabbing whatever was handed to them, even if it came with a blade at the end. It's strange, the way desperation can make cruelty look like compassion. A mother watching her child unravel, a husband losing the woman he married to, a fog of fear. People will accept any story that ends with the word better. It doesn't matter how the word is achieved or what it costs. Better is a spell that makes the unbearable tolerable. And in the 1,950 seconds, with its shiny appliances and cheerful denial, the country needed something to believe in. They needed the illusion that suffering could be neatly erased, that the brain was just another machine with a faulty wire waiting to be repaired. You picture a family walking into a hospital, clutching a small suitcase and a name written on a clipboard. The mother squeezes her son's shoulder as the nurse leads him down the hall. The father shakes Freeman's hand, because that's what men do when they want to feel in control. They tell themselves this is medicine, not surrender. They tell themselves they're doing what good parents do, choosing calm over chaos. The doctor smiles, says he understands, says he can help. That word help is a warm blanket over the sharpest blade. Desperation makes people stop looking at the edges of things. It makes them accept the tone of authority, the calm explanations, the clinical vocabulary that sounds like faith, dressed up in Latin. They don't see the patient rooms filled with quiet bodies, or the way the nurses avoid meeting each other's eyes. They only see the promise. 10 minutes, a tiny incision, a lifetime of peace. The words sound so small, so manageable, that you forget how large the silence will become afterward. You think about the doctors too, about how desperation moves upward. Freeman believed, in his own strange way, that he was saving people from the torment inside their skulls. Maybe he saw himself as a hero trapped in a world too afraid to catch up. He wasn't the first man to confuse conviction with compassion, and he won't be the last. There's something intoxicating about believing you can fix the human condition with the right tool, the right formula, the right flick of the wrist. Even now, you see echoes of it everywhere. New treatments, new machines, new pills that promise to make the mind more obedient. Different methods, same hunger. The packaging is modern, the vocabulary refined, but the yearning underneath is identical. The belief that peace can be manufactured, that if we just try hard enough, we can scrub suffering out of existence. You wonder if the families ever stopped believing after it all went wrong. If they lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince themselves it wasn't their fault, that they didn't know, that no one did. Maybe they told themselves it was mercy. Maybe that's the only way to keep breathing. After realizing you handed someone you loved over to an idea, desperation forgives itself by calling the past necessary. You imagine standing in one of those hospital corridors again, the same ones that smell faintly of bleach and lemon polish, the same halls where everything was supposed to be better by morning. The walls are quiet now, the room's empty. But if you listen closely, you can almost hear the echoes of footsteps and polite conversation, the rustle of papers, the hum of fluorescent light. You can hear the hope. It's never the cruelty that fools people, it's the calmness, the confidence in the voice of someone who says they understand what you're going through. Desperation doesn't need proof, it just needs something to hold. And for a while, an ice pick and a promise were enough. You close your eyes, and it hits you how fragile the line is between healing and harm, between faith and fear. You think about all the people who believed they were saving someone and all the ones who believed they were being saved. They met in the same room, under the same light, with the same hope pulling them toward opposite ends of the same lie. That's what desperation does. It turns even the unthinkable into something that sounds like love. The ice pick gleams again in memory, cold and ordinary. It doesn't belong in a hospital. Not really. It belongs in a kitchen drawer, beside measuring spoons and dull butter knives. That's the part that unsettles you, the simplicity of it. How something so domestic, so harmless, could become a tool of history. The metal catches the light the same way it would if you were cracking ice for a summer drink. There's no evil in its design, no warning carved into its handle. It's just steel and purpose, and the hand that wields it decides what kind of story it tells. You picture Freeman holding it up in the air, that faint, proud smile on his face. To him, it isn't a weapon, it's a key. The key to unlocking suffering, to quieting the noise of human pain. He called it elegant in its simplicity, and you can almost see why. The motion is quick, efficient, repeatable. Science loves repetition. It makes chaos look civilized. The first tap of the hammer, the subtle shift of bone, he thought he was conducting an orchestra of peace. But now, when you see the instrument behind glass in a museum display, it looks like something else entirely. It looks smaller than you imagined, more fragile, like a lie that managed to outlive the man who told it. There's a little card beneath it, a neat paragraph summarizing its history, its significance. People pass by slowly, hands clasped behind their backs, whispering in the reverent tones reserved for artifacts that once meant progress. You can almost hear the echo of his humming. You think about how easy it is to mythologize an object once the blood has faded. The ice pick becomes an idea, a metaphor, a symbol of arrogance masquerading as mercy. It's easier to blame the tool than to admit how many people believed in what it promised. It wasn't just Freeman who gave it power. It was the nurses who handed it to him, the administrators who approved his procedures, the families who signed the consent forms because they wanted their loved ones back. It was a collective faith, and faith always needs something to hold. Now it sits here, sterile, silent, admired by the same kind of people who would have once applauded it. That's the irony. You can't look at it without feeling both horror and fascination. The same curiosity that fueled its invention still lives in you. That small, uneasy voice whispering, what if it had worked? Because that's the most dangerous thought of all. The idea that maybe, under slightly different circumstances, you could have believed in it too. You imagine the sound, the faint tap of the hammer, the soft inhale of a nurse trying not to flinch, the stillness afterward. How could anyone mistake that quiet for healing? Yet they did, over and over, because the quiet looked like peace. The ice pick didn't cure madness. It erased the parts that made it visible, and for a society desperate for calm, that was enough. You look at the reflection of your own face in the glass case. The ice pick glints beside it, a relic of human certainty. You wonder what tools of today will one day sit under the same glass, explained in the same careful, detached language. What will people in the future whisper about us, shaking their heads in disbelief, saying, "They thought that was mercy"? The museum lighting hums above you, the same sterile glow that once illuminated operating rooms and waiting halls. The past feels close here, not distant like a storybook, but near, like a breath you can still feel on your neck. You stare at the small metal shaft and realize that history doesn't fade, it condenses. It becomes sharper, colder, easier to hold in your hand. The ice pick doesn't look evil. It doesn't look powerful. It looks like an object waiting to be used again. That's the part that stays with you as you turn to leave, the thought that progress is just belief, on repeat, that every age finds its own tool to make the unbearable seem noble. The glass reflects your movement as you walk away, and for a moment, it looks like the ice pick turns with you, gleaming in the light, still ready to serve the next version of certainty. You close your eyes, realizing the scariest part. Everyone meant well. That's what makes it harder to look away, harder to hate, harder to separate cruelty from kindness. The men in white coats weren't villains in their own story. They were saviors, armed with confidence and sterilized tools. The families weren't heartless either. They were terrified, desperate to see their loved ones quiet again, calm again, human again. Everyone believed they were helping. That's what makes the silence afterward so unbearable. It wasn't born of malice, but of mercy gone blind. You think about how easy it is to turn hope into harm when the two wear the same clothes. The hospital walls gleamed, the instruments shone, and the doctors smiled the way people do when they're certain they're on the right side of history. Freeman's steady hand, the family's grateful tears, the journalist's praise, it was all stitched together by good intentions. Every disaster begins that way, with someone wanting to make things better. It's easier to condemn when you imagine monsters. But what do you do when the monsters believed in healing? When they sterilized their instruments and said prayers before they began? The idea that horror can wear the face of kindness makes your stomach twist. It's a reminder that evil rarely announces itself. It arrives dressed as progress, with paperwork and polite applause. You picture one of those waiting rooms, bright with morning light. The families sit in rows, fidgeting with their coats, whispering encouragement to one another. They talk about faith, about bravery, about the miracle they've read about in the papers. Someone passes around a newspaper clipping of Freeman, smiling beside a patient, and it becomes a kind of talisman. No one wants to think about what's actually happening down the hall. Belief is easier than doubt, especially when doubt looks like cruelty and belief looks like care. And the nurses, how do you fault them? They followed orders. They wiped the instruments clean. They comforted the families. They wrote the words "successful operation" in neat cursive on the charts. Maybe they didn't believe it completely, but belief wasn't part of the job. Obedience was. That's another kind of faith, trusting the system so deeply that you stop asking what it's built on. You realize that what happened wasn't madness, it was order. Every tragedy like this hides behind structure. Schedules, signatures, safety, protocols. No one thought they were committing an atrocity. They thought they were doing their jobs, playing their part in a grand, noble project. And that's what makes it so chilling. The machine didn't run on cruelty, it ran on compassion, misdirected, precision without pause, purpose without reflection. When you open your eyes again, you see the world around you differently. The same tone of certainty still hums beneath everything. The belief that with enough data, enough innovation, enough willpower, we can perfect the human condition. It's not an old story. It's a recurring one. The ice pick just had sharper edges. The tools have changed, but the promise hasn't. We still chase calm. We still fear the chaos that lives inside us. You imagine standing in front of one of those patients, years later, after the noise of progress has faded, their eyes half-focused, their smile polite and permanent. You'd want to say something, "I'm sorry," maybe, but the words, it wouldn't fit. Because how do you apologize for good intentions? How do you mourn something that was done out of love? That's the real horror, the quiet kind, the one that lingers long after the blood dries. The realization that everyone thought they were saving the world. The truth presses against you, like the cold glass of a museum case. The past isn't buried. It's suspended, preserved, still humming faintly under the weight of justification. The photographs, the charts, the testimonials, they're all monuments to sincerity. And sincerity, you realize, is the most dangerous force of all, because it never doubts itself. You take a breath, and for a moment you can smell the bleach again, hear the hum of the lights, feel the sterile calm that once passed for progress. You think about all the times in history when people built horrors out of hope, each convinced they were the ones lighting the way. That's what keeps you awake long after the story ends, the knowledge that they didn't mean to destroy anything. They meant to heal, and maybe that's the part that will always haunt you the most.